9th, 2023. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Councilmember Harmon is not present. Councilmember Friedman?
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez?
Present.
Kind of.
Mayor Pro Tem Alejandro Gutierrez is not yet present. Councilmember Sutton? Here. Councilmember Jordan?
Here.
And Mayor Ross?
Here. Very good. And we have a couple of ceremonial items. Would you read those off, please, Madam Clerk?
Certainly, I will read both of them. Number 1, we have Historic Preservation Month, May 2023. And after that, number 2, National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day, May 14th through 20th, 2023.
Soldier, is this your event? Very good. Okay, good enough for me. This is Historic Preservation Month, May 2023. Whereas May is National Historic Preservation Month, and Santa Barbara joins California and the nation in honoring and sharing our unique architectural heritage. And whereas in Santa Barbara, historic preservation is a tool to help the community heal together as we recognize the contributions of our minority communities as forgotten stories are retold through protecting buildings. And whereas the city of Santa Barbara has demonstrated its leadership in historic preservation by developing an African-American/Black history context statement in partnership with Healing Justice Santa Barbara, consultants Page and Turnbull, and the California Office of Historic Preservation. And whereas in 2023, the African-American Black Historic Context Statement received awards from the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation, the California Preservation Foundation, and the American Planning Association Central Coast for excellence in advancing diversity and social change. Whereas the project demonstrates how the architectural history of Santa Barbara's African-American Black community is one way to recognize the contributions and achievements of Black leaders, cultural bearers, and institution builders, and tell the stories of an underserved and often overlooked community in Santa Barbara's rich history. And whereas Santa Barbara recognized that prioritizing the preservation of African-American Black historic resources has become a means of empowerment and education in Santa Barbara. Now, therefore, I, Randy Rouse, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, California, do hereby proclaim May 2023 as Historic Preservation Month in Santa Barbara and encourage community members to engage in activities and discussions to further their understanding of and appreciation for Santa Barbara's diverse architectural history. Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's certainly an honor to be here on behalf of this particular Historic Preservation Award, and particularly to acknowledge the City of Santa Barbara's participation in the project with our partners, Page and Turnbull, and with our community agency, Healing Justice. I'm a consultant with Healing Justice and part of the group that studied this for a year. We are so proud of it. It's received numerous awards already, and I think it's an award that belongs to the whole community because this represents all of us. And I want to say that I believe that this particular one, am I giving this one back to our city? This is the city's proclamation? Okay, this is our proclamation, but there is one for the city as well as for Page and Turnbull. And thank you for declaring this month Historic Preservation Month so that the whole community can have their attention focused on something that is so important to us, our land foundation and all the things that are built upon it. So we are all here to help preserve all that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kincaid. And I do want to hand you this award from the American Planning Association. That is for Healing Justice, our community partners in this entire effort. We wouldn't have been able to do this without you. My name is Ellen Kokenda. I'm the Design Review Supervisor. I am here on behalf of Nicole Hernandez, who is unfortunately not able to be here today, our architectural historian. What's so critical about this, it lays the foundation for understanding the African American and Black context in the city of Santa Barbara, and we will be able to build on those stories through time, so we can add to it. And I just want to acknowledge Commissioner Ensberg on the HLC, the Historic Landmarks Commission, who's also here in attendance today. And their work is to, again, include these stories, to preserve these buildings, continue to identify these structures and cultural institutions and the stories and the people that are all part of it. So again, a huge thank you to Healing Justice and all of your work in making this happen. Thank you. I appreciate it.
They always take the back row.
The peanut gallery in the back there. Welcome, Chief, and Santa Barbara's finest. This is National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day, May 14th through 20th, 2023. Whereas in 1963, the United States Congress and President John F. Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the week in which it falls is National Police Week. And as such, the Santa Barbara Police Department will celebrate the week of May 14th through 20th, 2023 as National Police Week. And whereas National Police Week, a collaborative effort of many organizations, including the National Law Enforcement Memorial and Museum, recognizes the service and sacrifice of law enforcement officers and honors officers who lost their lives in the line of duty for the safety and protection of others. And whereas law enforcement officers swear an oath to uphold public trust, even though through the performance of the duties of our law enforcement officers, the officers may become targets for senseless acts of violence. And whereas law enforcement officers are charged with pursuing justice for all individuals and performing their jobs with fidelity and the constitutional and civil rights of the public officers serve. And whereas it is important that the community members know and understand the duties, responsibilities, and sacrifices of law enforcement officers, and important that law enforcement officers recognize their duty to serve the people of their community, and whereas the members of the Santa Barbara Police Department take pride in serving their community and play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of local residents. Now, therefore, I, Randy Rouse, as Mayor of the City of Santa Barbara, do hereby proclaim May 14th through May 20th, 2023 as National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day in memory of those law enforcement officers who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their community, and to honor those law enforcement officers presently serving the community. Chief, congratulations, and all of you.
So I just want to acknowledge that in 2022, 118 officers were killed in the line of duty across the country in the year 2022. In California, there were 8 officers that were killed in the line of duty in the year 2022. Last night, during Sacramento ceremony, 9 officers' names, one was from 2021, were added to the Police Officer Memorial Wall in Sacramento. Next week, there's the official ceremony that happens in Washington, D.C., that will honor all of the officers that have been killed in the line of duty across the United States. So I just want to bring that to everyone's attention, and that is the purpose of this week. And I want to cordially invite everyone on Tuesday at 2 p.m. We'll be doing a memorial service in front of the station with our honor guard at our memorial, honoring those who have lost their lives in the last year. So I would encourage all of you to attend, but that will be 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 16th. I also want to acknowledge the men and women behind me who every day put their lives at risk to protect our community and serve our community. It is, as I've said before, behind this microphone, still what I consider a very noble profession, and the quality of service that this community receives and the public safety that this community receives from all of the men and women who serve, including those not in with a badge or in uniform is absolutely incredible. So I want to acknowledge their work again, say thank you for this acknowledgement, and thank you to all of them who continue to serve our community. So thank you.
All right, very good. Madam Administrator, are there any changes to the agenda?
Mayor Rouse, there are no changes to the agenda.
Okay, very good. We'll move then to the consent calendar. You have some items to read, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 4, loan forgiveness for Transition House Homeless Families Shelter located at 434 East Ortega Street. Ordinance adoption. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only. An ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara approving a second amendment to the Declaration of Covenants, conditions, and restrictions imposed on real property located at 434 East Ortega Street to restart a new 90-year term of use as a homeless family shelter. Item 5, approving the management performance and compensation plan and authorizing portal-to-portal pay for sworn fire employees. Ordinance introduction resolution. Recommendation of the council, A, introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara adopting the 2022-2024 management performance and compensation plan, and B, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara authorizing portal-to-portal pay for sworn fire employees assigned to mutual aid response. Item 6, authorization to apply for grant funding for the Ortega Park revitalization project in an amount not to exceed $4,500,000. Resolution, recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara approving the application for the Land and Water Conservation Fund Ortega Park Revitalization Project. Item 7, authorization for the Public Works Director to execute water purchase, transfer, exchange, or sale agreements. Resolution, recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara authorizing the Public Works Director to execute water purchase, transfer, exchange, or sale agreements. Item 10, amendment to position salary control resolution 22064 with updates to classification and compensation for certain positions. Resolution, recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending resolution 22064, the position salary control resolution for fiscal year 2023 to amend the established salary for positions as listed and establish the senior legal administrative assistant classification. Item 9, amendment to the relocation assistant payment amount for no-fault just cause evictions. Resolution, recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending the amount of relocation assistance payment previously established by resolution number 20084 for no-fault just cause evictions pursuant to Santa Barbara Municipal Codes Chapter 26.50. And item 10, increase in revenue and expenditure appropriations in the library's miscellaneous grants fund from California State Library Grants Resolution. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara authorizing the city administrator to prepare and file an application for funding and take other actions necessary, including executing the agreement to accept 2 grants from California State Library in the total amount of $1,490,826 and amending resolution number 22059 to approve an increase in revenue and expenditure appropriations in the library's miscellaneous grants fund in the amount of $1,490,826. And that's all the items, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any items that anybody from council needs to pull for discussion? Very good. Is there anyone on the line that wishes to pull a item for discussion that you're aware of, Madam Clerk? Or we can go to public comment. They can identify that then.
We have no raised hands online.
Okay, very good. I will then entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
Move consent.
Move consent by Friedman. Second by Sneddon. Very good. And let's go to a vote, please.
This is a motion by Councilmember Friedman, seconded by Councilmember Sneddon, to approve the entirety of the consent calendar as recommended.
Can you canvass Councilmember Gutierrez as well, please?
Yes. Mr. Gutierrez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez votes yes. Let's see. Has everyone cast their vote and entered?
Anybody that's here?
Let's see. Oh, excuse me, let me
Ms.
change the
Gutierrez is
attendance
not
real
here, yeah.
quick. One moment. I'm going to cancel this vote. We'll revote in one moment. I'm going to note Ms. Gutierrez is standing. Hold on.
This electronic system is supposed to make life so easy. Come on.
There we go. Okay, one second. And this is just noting attendance here. This is noting Ms. Gutierrez and Ms. Harmon's absence. Okay. Now this is the vote for the entirety of the consent calendar.
Okay. Very good, thank you. Okay. Passes unanimously with all those present, 5, 2, and 2 absent. Very good, thank you.
Very good.
All right, we'll then move to general public comment. 3 minutes at the podium for anyone who requests to speak on any item that's not on our agenda, but within the purview of this body. Or is there anyone present for public comment? Is there anyone online for public comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one hand raised for public comment, Aaron Ashland. Very good. Aaron Ashland, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. There were 8 new deputies that joined the sheriff's office yesterday. I believe we need to spend around $3 million per year, every year, to keep the almost 100 officers that we still have, but more like $4 million a year once we would be fully staffed. If departments are paying $20,000 to $30,000 more per year at starting pay, and we seem to lose all of our senior officers to other departments who are willing to pay them more than us, it seems like we're gonna have to make some changes really soon, or things are gonna keep continuing the direction they are. I bring this up because last week I brought up some ideas for the city to increase its revenue and not hurt the small businesses that are so critical to the success of our city. You see, Mr. Mayor, I don't want to go backwards like you seem to want to. I like us not to be short of police officers ever again, and finding ways to make the city more financially prudent would be a start. I mean, don't you think it's a little ridiculous that a city like ours, which is a destination known around the world, but we can't balance our budget? We must have a crazy amount of property tax revenue, but we're still broke somehow. It's time to come up with a better plan. I'll email you all the details of the things I mentioned last week because it's difficult to explain in only 3 minutes. But I can write it out with numbers, for example, to show you how it would work and leave the city with better businesses on its properties, which would lead to higher rents because many of these are revenue-driven rents, which we should be trying to maximize their vibrance and appeal so the city would get more revenue. Mr. Mayor, I heard you were an avid sailor. I see that you participate in the Yacht Club's Wet Wednesdays races. I believe that's what it's called, isn't it? I was wondering if you ever had to race your yacht with only 70% of its sails. If you had to do this, would you say you would have been successful? Or were you successful? Could you win a race with only part of your sails, Mr. Mayor? I guess what I'm trying to ask is that, isn't that the same position you're putting our chief in? She's expected to win with only 7% of the staff that was determined she would need long before she arrived. She is facing challenges for the police that we've not seen in our lifetime, but we're sending her out there every day with only 70% of our workforce and expecting her to keep us safe. I'm telling you, Mr. Mayor, they really might need you to get your hands dirty and help them out on the weekends. Maybe you could get deputized or something. And Mr. Mayor, last week I ran out of time, so I forgot to mention, but the next time you're racing your yacht down in the harbor, please remember that not all of us can afford a yacht to escape from if we don't feel safe. So maybe you could get us a fully staffed police department so we'd all be safe. But if anyone asks while you're down there what they're getting for their 11.3% rent at the harbor and the pier, you can tell them the view of the Pacific Ocean, the Channel Islands, and it's the city's property, which the business is built on, to view them all. And did I mention that you let those businesses have rooftop bars, which we aren't allowed to do on State Street? You see, our customers have to be in the middle of the street to enjoy just a fraction of the view the pier and the harbor businesses get. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Mayor?
End of time.
All right,
Seems
thank
a bunch,
you.
Don't you think? Thank you, guys.
Always a pleasure. Okay, very good. Are there any further public commenters online?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. With that, we will close public comment. We don't have any pulled consent items, so we'll take a report from the Finance Committee. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today, the Finance Committee heard presentations from staff regarding the proposed general changes to the enterprise fund fees. We gave comments but took no reportable action.
All right, very good. Then we'll take a report from the Ordinance Committee. Mr. Gutierrez, or are you the chair of the Ordinance Committee today?
I was the chair just for today.
Okay.
I can,
Please
either
go
one of us
ahead.
could report out that we had our first in-depth discussions on the formation of the Hope Fund, and the action taken today was to have a public workshop in the future to discuss more details.
All right, very good, thank you. And with that, we'll go to council member committee assignment reports. Does anyone have a report to give? Okay, that's quite all right. Then we'll move on to item 16. If you have an item to read, please, Madam Clerk.
Yes, item 16, authorization to establish a low-income household water assistance program agreement.
All right.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor Rouse, council members. My name is Dakota Corey, and I'm the Water Supply and Services Manager for the city. And I have with me today Lindsay Maas, who's the Assistant Finance Director. We're here from both of our divisions to jointly present about the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program. And I'm going to provide a brief program overview, and then I'll hand the presentation over to Ms. Maas, who will continue with more details about the program and how it interacts with other city programs. So this is a really exciting program to be bringing to the city. The Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program provides water and wastewater bill assistance for low-income households. It's going to be available to City of Santa Barbara customers early this summer after this council meeting. A little bit of history on the program. It was established in Congress in December 2020, so it's a federally funded but state-administered program that helps low-income households pay down their residential water and sewer bills. California was allocated $116 million in one-time funding for this program. Then, in addition to that, in the 2022-23 State Budget Act for the state of California appropriated an additional $200 million one-time funding to extend the program. That funding is expected to last through September 2026 or until funding is expired. And this entire program at the federal level was modeled after a similar program that provided customers with energy assistance help on their bills. So the service delivery model is a really important part of this program because it really helps the city implement this program quite efficiently. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a partnership with the state, so the Department of Community Services and Development. Then there's a local service provider, which is Communify, and finally the City of Santa Barbara. At the state level, they provide the overall administration and oversight and oversee the direct payment program. Then locally, our service provider, Communify, is the administrative component of the program, and they help review applications and determine eligibility for individual members, which is a really big help to the city because that would require a lot of staff time administratively. Finally, at the city, we enroll in the direct payment program through a service agreement with the Department of Community Services, and then we authorize that benefit and make sure it gets applied to our customers' bills. We can also help promote the program. So the big benefit with this program is that it applies to both arrearages and current bills, and it doesn't have a date at which it stops going back. So if we have customers that are in long default of their water or wastewater bills, this program will help pay that bill for them as long as they qualify for the low income. Funds are available on a first-come, first-served basis, and the funding amount varies based on household size, income level, and average bill amounts. And again, that's the part that Communify figures out for us. The benefit can range anywhere from the benefit can range up to $15,000 per applicant. and it can be applied to water charges, sewer charges, late fees, and taxes. One thing to note is because we're a full-service city, we also have trash and recycling on our utility bill. This program won't apply to that portion of a customer's bills. So now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ms. Maas, who's going to give you further details.
Thank you very much, Ms. Corey, and hi, Mayor Rouse and council member. I'm going to spend some time talking about the eligibility, how to apply, and some history of where we've been at with COVID and our water and late fees and shutoffs, and going forward, how we're going to be working on our arrearages. Thank you. So first off, let's talk about how our household members can be eligible for this program. There's two methods of how they qualify for it. One is just based on their gross income. It's either at or below 60% of the state median income. And just for reference, if you're talking about a household with 4 people in it, that's an annual income of $62,000 a year, to give you an idea. And the additional way that you could qualify for the program is if the current household member is already a recipient of one of the 3 programs, CalFresh, CalWorks, or the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program. A nice feature of this program is that if you are a renter and your utility bills are included in your rent, you are still eligible for the program. And there is some documentation that is needed. You would have to work with your landlord and have confirmation that they will apply the benefit to your rent payment. But that is an option for renters that pay their utilities through their rent. So a question that all of us want to know as we started to look at this program is how many people is it going to benefit? How many customers will be able to qualify and be eligible for the program? And unfortunately, as the city, we don't have income information for our customers, so we don't have that data readily available. However, our local service provider, Communify, did provide us with an estimate based on their information of working with our community members, and they estimate that we should be able to help about 500 community members with this program. So that's fantastic. And in an effort to reach out to all of our customers that are eligible for the program, we will be doing lots of marketing and direct contact with our customers. So we'll be seeing lots of different flyers in our water bills, inserts, adding messages to our water bills, of course, city news brief, our city website, our utility billing website. And Communify has information on their website, as long as the California State Program has the information connecting folks to this program. So lots of different approaches we'll be doing in both Spanish and English to make sure that our customers are aware of this program and take advantage of it. I want to talk a little bit about the history of water and wastewater billing for the last few years. When the COVID pandemic first began, there was the governor issued an executive order restricting water shutoffs to homes and small businesses. And we, of course, followed that and complied with that and discontinued doing disconnects. And we also discontinued doing late fees, applying late fees for our utility bills. And that has been the case for us since back in April, March, April of 2020. And because of that, we have had our arrearage balances or our past due balances grow in the utility billing area. We have not reinstituted late fees or disconnects since that time period. So we are at higher than typical amounts in terms of our past due customers that have not paid in over 61 days. We currently have about 1,500 residential customers that are past due, and that totals about $2.2 million at this point in time. That is all of our utility billing. That's water, wastewater, and trash customers, just so you know. Something that did come up during COVID to assist customers with their past due payments was we did take advantage of the California Arrearage Payment Program, and that did help about 692 residential and 50 commercial customers. They received $570,000 worth of credits that were applied to their bills. However, we haven't had any other grants or funding sources of this nature since then. So we're excited about this low-income water assistance program. So going forward, the governor did lift the executive order to restrict shutoffs back in January of 2022. And we're seeing that most public utilities have been reinstating the disconnects across the state and other areas to reduce the outstanding balances that have grown. And the big advantage to this program is that it's going to help our low-income customers pay back those past due and their current water and sewer bills, and they'll be able to avoid getting any late fees or having to face these disconnections in the event they're unable to pay. So it's really great timing for us to be able to roll out this program before we reinstate late fees and disconnects. The next slide is a little bit of a recap of what I just said, but a reminder that what we have coming up is after this 3-year pandemic pause, we'll be reinstating the utility bill late fees this summer in July, and then the disconnect shortly after in September. But some of the work we're going to be doing to help our customers, besides the LEWAP program and getting that rolled out and marketing that to everyone that we can reach, is that we'll also be offering payment plans, and we've decided on doing a standardized 12-month payment plan for our customers. It's just very simple, one option for folks that do have a need to have additional assistance in paying back any past due bills. And we'll be reaching out. Our utility billing team is going to be very customer service focused, really with an intent to try and help customers understand their ways to pay, their options to pay, and connect them with Communify so they can apply for the LEWAP assistance. This next slide is just a layout of the things I've already discussed, kind of the timeline of what's coming for us ahead, and we're hoping that the City Council would approve this for us today, and then going forward we'll be able to work with customers and Communify and make sure that they're able to apply, and that'll happen in a way that gives them the ability to have their past due and current due bills paid before we reinstate late fees and reinstate our disconnects. And we want people to know that it's very easy to apply for the program. You can dial 211 from your phone, and you can complete the screening form that way, or just the 1-800 number they provide, or by going online and downloading the application form right from the website. And of course, we'll have links to all of this on our website as well, and connecting people to all the right resources. And of course, if someone calls and has questions, we'll walk them through how they apply. That's what we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moss. Do we have any questions from council? Mr. Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple. So that number of 1,500 customers, and Communify thinks that 500 are in their sweet zone for either income or the state low-income programs. Is that a pretty good indication to staff that we have 1,000 customers who took advantage to not pay their bills, but they're not low-income customers?
I would say it's a good indication that we have 1,000 customers who are past due in their bill for various reasons, yes.
We have 1,500 that are past due.
Yes, but as you mentioned, I agree with your math that if about 500 are eligible for this program,
Okay.
that would leave a remaining 1,000 that we need to work with.
Any idea what the average past due amount is?
Oh, not offhand. I have it, but
So when
not
you say
handy.
you're going to do 12-month payment plan, that would be your structure. Is it, and I don't really want to get into the weeds, although I just hate to see you start something that just nobody can pay. Is that when you're looking at the numbers, is 12 months a reasonable amount to add to somebody's water bill to get them brought up?
We did look at that specifically, and we have 27,000 customers, and then of that 1,000 that are, or 1,500, I should say, that are past due, it really ranges from very small dollar amounts, $10, $100, and then a chunk in the middle that are in the thousands of dollar range, and at the high end, some that are much, much higher. So it really is going to depend. Some people are probably going to opt to just pay it off, and the people at the very top of the range, they'll still have a difficult time, most likely, with 12 months.
And then Josh knows I'm a big fan of just doing everything online. So are we able yet to, but I don't go anywhere online except just to pay the darn bill. I don't get to the propaganda pages. But are we able, when we have something that's, that obviously has a consequence, there's a timeline both for low-income people to take advantage of the program, and there's a timeline on here, the end of August, I think, right, to set up a payment plan. Do we have an option when you just log on that we get a pop-up that takes over the screen to bring that to people's attention before they move on and ignore the inserts page or whatever. I just, I'm always worried that we're just not leveraging the ability of no labor to bring that to people's attention anytime they just go online in a normal course of business, and rather we had to put a mailer out or worry about getting them in person. But do we have the option of doing something like that?
I might defer because I've only been here 3 months. I'm not sure.
Well, let's just leave it as a suggestion to look into, because I just think it's a concern for me all the time, just paying, that am I missing something? Should I go look? But I think I have a little bit of inside baseball ability, but it just seems like an opportunity missed for people that do get into the system, and if there's something really pressing or important that's not immediately put in front of them, they can X out of that box and then go on with their business.
Okay, thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Further questions from council? Madam Clerk, are there any speakers online for this item?
Mr. Mayor, no online speakers.
Okay, very good. Are there any comments? Ms. Sneddon?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I just want to say this is a really excellent program, and it was unanimously supported by the Water Commission as well. Thank you for bringing it forward. Happy to move the staff recommendation.
Move stack, that's a movement by Sneddon, second by Jordan, or second by Friedman? One of you guys, just figure it out. Mr. Hagmark,
I know it was in the staff report, but I just wanted to reiterate this, that currently we do not, outside of the state funding opportunity, which is fantastic, we do not have another funding source for this. We're really thankful that we have this opportunity. But I just wanted it not to deter us from going down this road, but just to know that at any time the state could fall into, financial woes and this funding could be pulled in the program. Not only the funding part, but even having Communify helping to administer. I mean, that's a huge effort to make this program happen, and we are very thankful to have that right now. But I just want to make sure that the council is aware that we are kind of at the mercy right now of the state, because we have strict rules on what we can use ratepayer funds for, and this would not be a program we could use ratepayer money for.
excellent, thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second on the floor, and further discussion? Then we'll go ahead and go to the tote board.
Very good. This is a motion by Councilmember Sneddon, seconded by Councilmember Jordan to approve the staff recommendation.
One of those guys.
Would it, Jordan or Friedman? Friedman, okay. One moment, let me just. Very good. And I'm sorry, are we calling Councilmember Friedman, Councilmember Gutierrez first before everyone else votes? Councilmember Gutierrez.
Yes.
Councilmember Gutierrez votes first. Okay, we'll start the vote.
Very good. Passes 5 to absent Alejandro Gutierrez and absent Megan Hartman. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
All righty, we'll move on to the next item. You have that item to read, Madam Clerk.
Yes, this is item 17, storage of personal property in public areas, ordinance introduction. And the recommendation is the council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara adding chapter 9.96 to the municipal code to regulate the storage of personal property in public places.
Very good. Hello, Ms. Anderson. And Mr. Doimus.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and council members. I'm Barbara Anderson, Senior Assistant to the City Administrator, and I'm here to present the draft ordinance on the storage of personal belongings in public areas. I'm also joined by John Joemas, our Assistant City Attorney, who will speak specifically to applicable state law and case law as it relates to the draft ordinance. The recommendation before council is to introduce and subsequently adopt, by reading of title only, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara, adding Chapter 9.96 to the municipal code to regulate the storage of personal property in public places. On April 25th, the ordinance committee unanimously supported that the ordinance be forwarded to city council for introduction and adoption. So why is this ordinance needed? Of the utmost importance is addressing the health and safety issues that relate to unattended and stored personal property in public areas. And our commitment is to preserve clean, safe, and accessible public areas while also recognizing the need for individuals to retain access to a limited amount of personal property. We want to be clear that the purpose of the ordinance is to abate violations, not to criminalize homelessness. We will ensure due process rights for any personal property collected, stored, or destroyed. State law is very clear about this process, and Mr. Joymus will speak to both state law and case law that is applicable to the proposed ordinance.
Thank you, Barbara. Mayor, City Council. In drafting this ordinance, obviously, we had to take strong consideration of the cases out there dealing with this issue, as well as state law. Up there, as you see on the slide, is the California Civil Code, and it pertains to when public agencies are either presented or they gather, recover abandoned items in the public. And for that, public agencies are required to keep it 90 days before they can dispose of it. We follow that law. Now, the state law, the civil code up there, usually has a numeric value they place on property, saying in terms of if it's worth equivalent of this amount, you must keep it, store it for 90 days. We go beyond that because there's recent case law that looks at, it's not just a numerical value. We also look at items like legal papers, photographs, sentimental values. We look at even items, how they're stored. If they're stored in a way to show that the person intended to preserve it, like in a backpack or folded and such, we would also do that. That's our city policy. We follow that through encampments and everything else. So that's how we would intend to apply this, is not only following the state law 90-day provision, but as well as our own city policy based on additional case law has come there. Next slide, please. In terms of this ordinance, the genesis of it started back in 2015. LA had an ordinance, and they were going around taking items in the public right away, public places, and impounding them and seizing them and destroying them. And that's where they got in trouble. The court determined there that you had to give due process. So whether pre-due process, meaning before you take it, you have to notify the person that you would do such, or if that was not available due to the location or the situation, post, meaning we have your stuff, here's where it is, you have an opportunity to pick it up. You just can't summarily seize it and destroy it. The Court of Appeals, obviously ruled against LA, so based on that, Los Angeles crafted an ordinance that we followed and looked at and kind of created back in 2019 when we first brought this ordinance. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the Levan Court ruled that you can't just remove and destroy properties without providing due process, without following the civil code. What the court didn't say is that you do not have the ability to do this. Public agencies, cities, counties do have the ability to control the public spaces and right of way and can remove it. What the court says, if you do that, you just got to make sure you don't just seize and destroy it, and you provide some form of due process with that. And that's what we've done. Since the Levan case, there came another case out of LA called Garcia versus City of Los Angeles. In that case, the city was destroying large, bulky items, seizing it and destroying it, and thinking that the larger it was, maybe it would somehow be constitutional. Nope, the court said no, it doesn't matter the size. Again, you must provide due process, and you must at least provide an opportunity to recover it and store it per the civil code. So with that in mind, the latest version of the, looking at the Garcia case of the courts, we developed a ordinance that we feel is very defensible in court. Also, it makes this ordinance not only defensible because we provide pre and post deprivation notice that Ms. Anderson will get into, is that we also provide, due to the work of Ms. Anderson, Councilmember Sneddon, we also provide places that you can, we're offering where people can store their items on top of it. So there's an additional level of protection that people have a place they can actually present and leave and store their items.
In the draft ordinance, storage is defined as being left unattended in the same location for more than 4 hours. The ordinance prohibits storage of unattended personal property in defined public areas. It also prohibits the storage of any attended personal property in a public area that cannot be immediately moved. As you can see from these photos, abandoned property is regularly found in different locations all around the city. These include sidewalks, public parks, and entrances to public buildings. It is also important to point out that all of these items, as photographed, were unattended. We would also like to highlight that there are several important exclusions to the draft ordinance. The ordinance does not apply to storage on private property. It also does not apply to transportation or mobility devices, such as bicycles, walkers, and wheelchairs. Moreover, it does not apply to personal property stored on public property pursuant to a permit, ordinance, statute, or other authorization by the city or state. The ordinance sets forth requirements for pre-removal and post-removal notice, as Mr. Doimus noted. If after 4 hours written notice, the unattended personal property has not been removed, the city may store it for potential recovery for 90 days. The draft ordinance also specifies certain situations where property cannot be left regardless of duration. This includes personal property that does not allow for passage for people with disabilities, obstructs the city's maintenance, clearing, or other operations in public areas, personal property left behind in a public area after a posted closure time, property within 5 feet of an operational utilizable entrance, exit, driveway, or loading dock, and contraband or property that constitutes evidence of a crime. Property left in prohibited locations can be removed immediately. The first photo of personal belongings to the left was attended and had the ability to be moved by the individual. As city staff, we would encourage them to not block the sidewalk to allow for persons with disabilities to pass. We would also bring it to the attention of CityNet, our primary homeless outreach provider, to encourage them to accept case management and therefore be able to offer storage for their important items. We'll touch more on this in just a minute. The photo to the right was of personal belongings that were completely unattended. A written notice would be posted, and after 4 hours, the belongings that remained at that location would be stored by city staff for 90 days. In addition to a pre-removal notice, the proposed ordinance requires that written notice be left behind by city employees after personal property is stored. This is referred to as a post-removal notice. The city must store it for potential recovery for 90 days. Identification is not required to recover impounded personal property. The owner may claim the property if they describe the items or the location of where the property was found or other identifying details. The city will provide signage specific to public locations where unattended property will be prohibited entirely without the need for additional notice prior to removal. These public locations may include public streets, sidewalks, plazas, parking lots, parks, beaches, or public buildings. There will be a 3-month period between the adoption of the ordinance, if council chooses that today, and when enforcement will begin across city departments. The purpose of this period of time is to facilitate coordination and education across city departments on the specifics of the ordinance to ensure proactive and consistent enforcement, and a collaboration with the Downtown Ambassador Program, Volunteers in Policing, and homeless outreach providers to help inform residents and visitors in the city of Santa Barbara of the new ordinance. In regards to storage of personal belongings, there will be 2 standard 26-foot storage containers purchased and placed on city property that will be secure but also accessible. 1 container will be utilized by city staff to store impounded personal belongings for the required 90 days. The second container will be managed by CityNet, the city's primary homeless outreach and case management provider, to support people experiencing homelessness in storing their personal belongings that can be accessed by a case manager. This will assist individuals that tend to store their belongings in certain public areas for long periods of time. We also hope that this will support individuals in being more open to emergency shelter and supportive services. It is often the case that individuals do not want to leave their personal belongings, so they decline the offer of these shelter or service opportunities. We want to provide them the option to say yes because they know their important items will be stored for them. To speak specifically to enforcement, the ordinance is abatement focused. Therefore, enforcement of the ordinance through criminal prosecution is limited, only in situations where a person either obstructs a city employee from removing stored personal property or continues to violate the ordinance after being given notice by a peace officer or other city employee charged with code enforcement and given a reasonable opportunity to comply. Again, the recommendation before council is to introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adding Chapter 9.96 to the municipal code to regulate the storage of personal property in public places. We welcome any questions you may have at the time.
Thank you very much. We have questions from council. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Just a few questions, more on just different scenarios, so understand them. So say there is property that is abandoned and it's tagged, and then at the 3.5-hour mark, the person comes back. So what happens then? Nothing happens, and then if they leave it again, you have to come back 3.5 hours later. If someone's coming in under the 4 hours, what happens then?
Mayor Russ and Councilmember Friedman, you're correct. They're able to move their belongings from that area after it's noticed within that 4-hour period. So if they move their belongings, they're able to do that as an individual and move to another area where, again, it's not following any of the guidelines in terms of obstructing public right-of-way, passage, entrance to a building, et cetera, then they have every right and ability to do that. We continue to provide outreach to individuals experiencing homelessness. You didn't specifically reference that in this situation, but if they were, we would, again, encourage them to facilitate an opportunity with a case manager to store the belongings that are most important to them.
In this case, where it's just under the 4 hours, would they have the requirement of moving it 300 feet since it was tagged?
Councilmember Friedman, yes, according to the ordinance, that 300 feet measure is there. But again, we specifically state that abatement is not just continuing to move belongings 300 feet at a time. Yeah.
And then, so say after 4 hours, nobody's there, it gets picked up, the property, and then we store it in the secured location. What happens at, say, an hour later, they come back, there's a sign that's there that tells them how to contact the city to get their belongings?
Yes, Mayor Russ and Councilmember Friedman, that post-removal notice is very detailed specific to the department that stored those belongings and how to access them with that contact information.
And then just two more questions. And then on the other side, so say it's confiscated, 90 days passes, what happens then? And then what happens if on day 91 someone comes back?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, I think Assistant City Attorney Doimas can answer this more clearly. That one-day measure, I know that some of these occurrences when they're disputed goes to Office of Risk Management. And I also know that 90-day period adhered to because storage is limited, but there is some, I'm sure, department standards that we will need to standardize.
Mr. Doma, maybe not 91, but say like day 95, not just a day later.
Sure, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman. The ordinance, the state statute only calls for 90 days. I don't know if staff will immediately create a program where they, calendar the 90-day period and throw it out or not, but from a liability standpoint, if it's 95 days, we've met our obligation under state law to hold it there. Now, whether it's going to still be there after 94, 95, 97 days, I don't know. If the department wants to provide a buffer or not. All I know is the minimum requirement, at least, we must follow is holding it for a 90-day period.
So we are meeting the minimum. Great. And then my last question goes to the storage unit for CityNet. An individual is within CityNet services, and so they're storing their belongings for whatever reason. And then are are they required to be in services, or is this an incentive for them to get into services, or a mix of both?
Yeah. Mayor Russ and Councilmember Friedman, it is a requirement for them to accept case management services, so the case manager can facilitate the back and forth of those belongings.
Perfect. So this wouldn't be somebody who just comes in, wants to store their belongings, and then, but this is something that will really get people to come in and accept services.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So how, for the guy in the street, not that guy in the street, but for this guy in the street, how does this process begin? Who do I contact when I see a group of tents blocking a sidewalk? How is that going to work?
So to Councilmember Friedman, you referenced tents, so that is actually illegal camping enforcement, and so that is an encampment response team.
A train of shopping carts. That's probably another ordinance, too. Just belongings that are clearly blocking the sidewalk and preventing pedestrians from using it. How does the ordinary citizen start this process? Who do they contact?
So Mayor Russ and Councilman Jordan, so you're right that we have multiple pathways to be able to address attended and unattended belongings. That pathway, we have a few city departments and teams that are constantly monitoring areas that are known to have a level of belongings. So that notice would be administered by that initial department that's responding.
No,
If
back
we
up.
receive a complaint.
Back up.
Yes, yeah.
How does somebody make a complaint to bring it to those people's attention?
Right now, those emails come into any number of city staff,
Yep.
but we are actually initiating a very comprehensive constituent management software system that in the middle of June, all complaints will be directed to one area of the city website and would be administered and triaged based on that.
So,
Yeah.
I'm constantly referring people to that page called, for some reason, maintenance requests, right? That have the person in need button. Any thoughts on just getting another button on that page to talk about, blocked sidewalks type of thing? So, as you know, this helps somebody calling me, and then I call you, and then you call somebody else, and eventually that would just feed into your new CMS system maybe, right?
Mayor Russ and Councilmember Jordan, you're correct. Our ability to triage that, again, a lot of people have been informed about the kind of illegal dumping notifications, the litter removal notifications, the encampment response notification forms, so we can easily add another opportunity there. But again, I think every city department is going to be trying to channel and utilize this new complaint system to be able to be more efficient in our response. And then it will be triaged per the department where the belongings are currently being located and stored.
I see it similar to when we started those two form stack forms because everybody was calling everybody or emailing everybody, and we eventually got, everybody browbeat that even if you want to call your favorite council member or staff person, you still need to get it into the system on that form type of thing. So on the same page here, right?
Exactly. And we want there to be multiple pathways for people to administer complaints regarding unattended personal belongings. But I also want to take an opportunity to educate the broader public that these things take time, right? So you might have seen these personal belongings unattended at the moment you were passing them by, but it is a process. The 4-hour, leaving those belongings unattended and stored in that location for that period of time, the noticing, the post-removal notice, all of that is a process. So we ask in advance for patience as we address those
Definitely.
complaints, yeah.
And then I think you can assure me that whatever the process is, the person that first goes out there to ascertain that it's there, or the person that goes out there, the team that goes out there to actually remove the stuff, those are generally very engaged people with our homeless resources and know the talk, know that they're not just there to throw stuff in the back of the truck. They have the ability, if somebody was walking up at that time and saying, hey, that's my stuff, they have the ability to begin that dialogue with, not only can you not keep your stuff here, but we have a place to keep it, and we have services for you, and they can just supply that nudge. This isn't just purely gathering stuff off the street, right?
Yes, Councilmember Jordan, our first approach and a number of our subsequent approaches are always compassion-led. And you are correct. We often know individuals by name. We have an established relationship and rapport with them. And a number of times, we often know the belongings and who they're associated with. So as Mr. Doimus stated, we will then lean into outreach and education and letting those people know that they cannot leave those belongings unattended for that 4-hour period or longer. That is the purpose of the 3-month outreach period. Our ambassadors, our outreach providers have all asked for consistent talking points to be able to refer to the process, the components of the ordinance. So again, there's consistency of messaging and people aren't getting mixed, I would say messages or misperceptions of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, very good. I can't see Mr. Gutierrez's hand or if he's raising or not. Madam Clerk, do you know if, any questions from him?
Not this time, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Ms. Anderson, you might have mentioned it before, but you mentioned there was going to be a delay between now, if it's passed today, then the actual activation. And that was the time to inform and to go out and give notice and that kind of thing. Do you have an approximate timeline for that? You might?
Mayor Rouse, if the ordinance is adopted today, it would be introduced today and adopted. It comes back a week later for that formal period, the 30-day period. The 3-month outreach period is part of that. We're including the 30 days that it takes for ordinances to be enforced regardless. Do you want to add to that, Mr. Davis?
I was just going to add to Mayor Rouse, too, one of the most important aspects, too, besides the notice you're providing, the pre-notice, there'll be locations where there are signs, so it takes time to figure out those locations that are integral to either pedestrian pathway or health and safety where you can't have obstructions. So we want to get those signs up too for people to know in town that any storage for any amount of period of time is not allowed either. So
Mr. Domi, so the signs, the existence of signs themselves don't necessarily constitute notice, is that, or?
that's a very good
We're just
question.
extending it to be a little more user-friendly.
Sure. When you have the situation for a sign, the sign constitutes one form of notice that you can't do it. So it allows, instead of waiting the 4-hour period, allows staff to remove immediately. But after that, we would still provide post-deprivation notice, meaning we would provide, leaving that place notice for the person to know it was taken, where you can recover it from, et cetera. So as long as there's some type of due process, so in that situation, the sign allows us to provide notice, like if you leave it, it's going to be taken, there's no 4-hour period. But to even be extra cautious, we'd still provide post-deprivation notice at that spot, letting the person know where it was taken, how they can have the opportunity, where they can get the items, et cetera.
And as part of this effort is to ease the ability to people get into services, and oftentimes not only just property, but there might be an animal involved. Now, do we have a coordinated effort going on with animal control about that? Is that, it's not part of the ordinance, I know.
Sure.
But part of the ongoing effort?
Yeah, Mayor Rouse, we actually use our regional action plans, so the Eastside Neighborhood, State Street, and Waterfront all have regular meetings, both biweekly as well as monthly, where we connect with providers. So if an individual does have an animal, there are actually efforts that not only Animal Control has offered to pick up that animal, bring them to Humane Society. Humane Society will actually emergency board that animal for up to 2 weeks. There are also some shelter locations that have allowed animals to come with clients. We actually just recently experienced that several months ago with a client that didn't want to separate from their animal rescue mission, actually allowed that to happen. So there are a variety of ways that we've been able to be adaptable to folks that have animals, knowing that it's really precious for them to stay connected.
That's fair. Yeah, having been a part of a lot of service-resistant discussions in the past, I appreciate that. If there are no further questions, we do have a public speaker on this item. Daniel Ramirez, you have 3 minutes at the podium. And Madam Clerk, do we have people queuing up online for this item?
Mr. Mayor, there are no raised hands.
Thank you. Mr. Ramirez.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Daniel Ramirez, and I'm here today as the Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Downtown Santa Barbara Organization to support staff recommendations for the proposed ordinance to regulate the storage of personal property in public places. As you know, our organization, Downtown Santa Barbara, alongside the city and many local partners, are working hard to support unhoused residents get the resources and services they need. It is a challenge not only affecting the nation, but also affects our local economical vitality of our community and has been a significant concern for our locals, our business owners, and visitors. Unattended personal property in public access areas poses a health and safety risk, interfering with the safe passage of pedestrians and people with disabilities in the public right-of-way and fostering unsanitary conditions. The proposed ordinance would establish clear guidelines to assist service providers, businesses, and local authorities to navigate these important issues around personal property while giving those in need of storage options for their property. This is one important prong of a multi-pronged approach in collaboration with our diverse resource partners to support a safe, welcoming place for residents, visitors, and businesses. While this, of course, is a complicated issue and ordinance to consider, it is ultimately a necessary way to support all of our residents, housed and unhoused, and strive for a stronger community. I encourage you to support the staff recommendations for the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, you came in under the time because I forgot to start the timer, so very good job. All right, back to council for deliberation. Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I'm very supportive of this. It's been a long time coming, and I think mentioned this before. It really highlights Ms. Anderson's long-time commitment to looking at issues and how to alleviate issues for our homeless neighbors. And this has been a discussion for a long time, and how to do this humanely for the public good and to have options for storage, not just clearing things away as if they're garbage. So I really am very appreciative of the time and care and the legal expertise of Mr. Doimus going into this as well and following this all the way through. Very supportive. Happy to make the motion.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. I'll second the motion and just want to thank our staff for working to come up with this program. I think it will just improve accessibility through downtown and other areas of town, and also provide it's an incentive for those who want to get into services or are considering it, that extra incentive that will help stabilize them and get them more stable housing conditions and even mental health and other services. So it has benefits in many other ways too. So I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Very good. Well, as Ms. Anderson knows, I've been poking her for quite a few months about this and getting it done, and having the support of Mr. Doimus and Stotts out there. This is fabulous. It's another tool to help us help the people that are out there on the streets that are unsheltered and make progress to what we've been trying to do on the street. So I'm very pleased with the progress, and thank you. With that, we will entertain a motion we've got a motion. We'll entertain a vote. How's that?
Very good. We have a motion by Councilmember
Raise your hand.
Sneddon, seconded by Councilmember Friedman to approve the staff recommendation. Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Yes.
Very good. And we'll start the electronic vote.
Very good. Then it passes unanimously, 5-0 with all present, absent Gutierrez, absent Harmon. Thank you.
Very good.
All right, we will move on to the next item. Madam Clerk.
Very good. Our next item is number 18, appeal of the Architectural Board of Review's project design approval of development at 425 Santa Barbara Street.
All right, very good. And Ms. Irely, do we have staff for a report there or no?
Mayor Rouse, yes, we do have staff. They were making their way to the
Oh,
table.
they're there. Thought I recognized those guys. Very good. Well, this is an appeal of a project approved by, for PDA by the ABR, and it's a quasi-judicial process in which we will take testimony from both sides, examine evidence, and make findings at the end. I'm going to start out with any ex parte declarations. And I will say, to start with, I visited the site myself yesterday and on my own. Mr. Friedman.
No ex parte, but I did visit the site on my own.
Very good. And so did Mr. Jordan. So, all on his own, on our own. All right, very good.
The site on my own. Thank you.
I believe those, yes,
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Gutierrez saying he visited on his own.
Very good. So this is the structure of this hearing. First, we'll go out with the staff presentation. And after the staff presentation and questions by council, we will go into the presentation by the appellant. And the appellant has 20 minutes to use all at once or to reserve for rebuttal. And we will keep track of time for you. That'll be followed up by the applicant. And then at that time, we'll have staff be able to clarify whatever was said in the issue. And after that, we'll do public comment on the item forward. So let us go ahead and start with our staff presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. My name is Stephanie Swanson. I am an Associate Planner in the Community Development Department. I'm here with Ms. Ellen Kokinda, the Design Review Supervisor, and also Julia Pujo, our Environmental Analyst, is here. We're here today to discuss an appeal at 425 Santa Barbara Street. Today, Council will decide the appeal in the exercise of its independent judgment based on the record of the proceedings of the Architectural Board of Review. Staff does not have any new evidence they ask the council to consider. The Architectural Board of Review, or ABR, granted project design approval, or PDA, on March 20th, 2023, and the project was then appealed by Barry Capello of Capello & Knoll LLP, representing Platform SB LLC, the property owners of the adjacent parcel at 126 East Haley. Staff is recommending that the appeal be denied and that the decision of the ABR be upheld, and we will discuss why in the following slides. To summarize the overall project, it is a 19-unit apartment complex in the Priority Housing Overlay and Central Business District. 10 studio units, 8 one-bedroom units, and 1 two-bedroom unit are proposed. The project exceeds base density using both the city's AUD program and the state's density bonus program. Accordingly, 2 deed-restricted affordable units at the very low income level, 1 studio and 1 one-bedroom, and 1 deed-restricted studio at the moderate income level are proposed, leaving 16 market rate units. The state program allows for up to 2 concessions for the project. The applicant is using 1 to reduce open yard requirements. The project meets all other aspects of the city's municipal code and was approved by the ABR. To give us some context, 425 Santa Barbara Street is shown in purple. It is located mid-block on Santa Barbara Street between East Haley Street and East Gutierrez Street. Smart and Final and Office Max are located across the street. Highway 101 is approximately 1.5 blocks away to the south. The appellant's property is shown in blue, and as you can see, shares an interior property line to the south and the rear property line to the west. Here's an aerial view showing the site, again approximately in the center. You can see the appellant's property wrapping the site with parking lining the shared lot lines. The project has been reviewed by the ABR a total of 5 times, and at the final hearing, the ABR granted PDA. To remind us of ABR's purview, at noticed hearings, the ABR is required to make project compatibility findings that ensure a project is compatible with the neighborhood and any applicable guidelines. ABR cannot consider parking calculations or requirements, whether on or off-site, or reduced proposed density. When modifications are requested, the ABR's role is to only comment on the aesthetics, not the supportability of the modification. For density bonus projects, any requested concession through the state program is outside of ABR's purview. It is staff's responsibility to ensure the project is consistent with the municipal code and alert the ABR if any modifications or concessions are requested. In this case, the project uses a concession through the state density bonus program. To very quickly summarize density bonus, the state allows applicants to propose more housing units than allowable by code in exchange for some of those units being affordable. Up to 50% density bonus is available through the program. The lower the affordability level or the more deed-restricted units, the greater the density bonus. To calculate base density under state law, you use the highest allowable density, as noted on the right side of the screen. In this project's case, it is the general plan's priority housing overlay at 63 units per acre. For this particular site, base density is 14 units when using density bonus law. At this site, up to 21 units with 3 very low income units is allowable under the state density bonus law. This project uses a 35% density bonus with very low income deed restrictions. This requires that 11% of the units be deed restricted to the very low income tier. This works out to 19 units total and 2 very low income units, 1 studio and 1 one-bedroom. In addition to the increased density, the state program allows for concessions that waive or reduce zoning requirements. The applicant requested a concession to allow for some of the required open yards to be connected and some of the required open yards to not meet minimum dimensions or square footages. These 2 second-story units show all 3 aspects of the concession and are the only 2 units that don't meet the minimum square footage requirement. The proposed balconies don't have the required 5-foot wall separating them for privacy. Instead, they have a shortened wall the same height as the balcony frontage. While the ABR did regularly comment on a desire for additional landscaping throughout the project, they expressed no concerns related to the open yard concession. The project is actually eligible for 2 concessions through the state density bonus program. Earlier iterations of the project included a concession for height to allow the project to exceed the maximum 48-foot height maximum for AUD projects in the priority housing overlay. The applicant presented an overall height of 48 feet 7 inches at the January 30th, 2023 hearing. Staff confirmed for the board that the height was allowable with a density bonus concession and that staff had approved the concession since there were very few ways to deny a density bonus concession, such as health and safety concerns or an impact on a historical resource. The board requested confirmation that the proposed affordability was compliant, which staff confirmed as well. The board still commented that the height was a concern and asked the applicant to study lowering plate heights to meet that 48-foot maximum height. The applicant then presented an overall height of 47 feet, 6.5 inches at the February 21st ABR hearing. The applicant accomplished this by lowering the large parapet wall on the top roof line, but kept the plate heights at 10 foot 1 inch on every floor. The ABR still continued to comment on the overall height of the project. Ultimately, the plans that the ABR approved had a proposed 43-foot, 8.5 inch height. The plate heights on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stories were each lowered 1 foot, and the parapet roof was lowered once again. The project meets the 48-foot maximum for AUD projects in the priority housing overlay, and the height concession is no longer required. The project is still eligible for a density bonus concession should the applicant choose to use it. By lowering the plate heights, and in doing so reducing the overall height of the project to comply with the city's municipal code, as well as shrinking the building footprint away from the interior property lines to increase landscaping, the ABR was able to approve the project at the March 20th, 2023 hearing. The ABR made the required project compatibility findings shown here on the screen, citing that the development is consistent with applicable design guidelines and the municipal code. The board cited eclectic architecture in the area and an appropriate size, mass, bulk, height, and scale for the neighborhood. These were the last of the 3 findings the ABR made. The board noted that the project includes an appropriate amount of open space and landscaping. The appellant's appeal letter focuses on 3 issues that are consistent with public comment letters that the appellant submitted throughout the ABR process. The first issue is parking. No parking is proposed for the project. As we can see here from the code section on the screen, a maximum of 1 space per unit is required. Therefore, no parking is compliant with the municipal code. The appellant contends that the ABR should have required the applicant to restrict vehicle ownership of the tenants, citing a housing authority project for transitional housing. Transitional housing is regulated by the California Government Code and has its own set of requirements and restrictions and is not comparable to the subject project. The subject project is a market-rate apartment complex with 3 affordable units consistent with the city's inclusionary requirements and the state's density bonus program. The ABR had no authority to restrict the potential tenants of the subject project, and the project is compliant with the municipal code's parking requirements. The second appeal issue is adequate interior setbacks adjacent to the appellant's property. As we saw on an earlier slide, the appellant's property wraps around the subject property, sharing the subject's property's south and west interior property lines. Per the Santa Barbara Municipal Code, no interior setback is required for an AUD project when the property is located next to a non-residential zone, such as the subject property. Here we have the site plan that the ABR reviewed on January 30th, 2023. The shared property lines are shown in red. In this plan, the storage lockers at the rear of the property had a maximum 1 foot 4 inch clearance, and the trash room had a 1 foot 6.5 inch clearance. Overall, the blue shows the interior setbacks between the proposed buildings and the appellant's property. The ABR commented at several hearings that additional landscaping on all 4 sides of the building was desirable. They did not have specific comments or concerns regarding the interior setbacks in regards to neighborhood compatibility. Their comments were purely related to increasing landscaping. The interior setbacks remained consistent at the February 21st, 2023 hearing. At the March 20th, 2023 hearing, the applicant presented this revised site plan incorporating a larger interior setback and additional plantings consistent with the ABR's direction. Again, the shared property lines are shown in red. At the trash enclosure, the interior setback was reduced by 3 inches, leaving 1 foot 3.5 inches of clearance. The interior setback along the storage lockers increased approximately 2 feet to a maximum clearance of 3 foot 3.5 inches. The blue again shows the interior setback from the proposed building to the appellant's property. The project is not required to have an interior setback. Therefore, the project is compliant with the municipal code's setback requirements. The ABR can comment on overall mass bulk and scale of a project, but they cannot require a particular setback that exceeds the municipal code. The appellant letter includes comments regarding construction staging concerns. A construction plan is not required of projects at the ABR stage, nor is it a building permit requirement. Per Public Works staff, Public Works is likely to approve temporary sidewalk closures, pedestrian protection scaffolding, and parking restriction waivers to accommodate construction deliveries, and they suggested that the proposed courtyard will be adequate for on-site construction staging with a qualified contractor. These are common construction issues regulated through the building permit process, and they are not project-specific impacts. Building and safety staff also confirmed that the project is compliant with any kind of fire separation or seismic separation requirements. Therefore, the interior setback concern is not a health or safety concern. The appellant's third issue with the project is the overall size, bulk, and scale, contending that at 4 stories, it is out of scale with the neighborhood. Here we have a sketch of the project on Santa Barbara Street. The project site is underlined in blue to highlight it. The ABR did regularly struggle with the overall height of the project, especially when the applicant was using a density bonus concession to exceed the 48-foot maximum height. However, there are 2 issues with the height struggle. The first issue is technically no longer an issue. For the first 3 of 5 ABR hearings, a density bonus concession was requested to allow the project to exceed the 48-foot height maximum. Staff can only deny a density bonus concession if it is irrelevant to the project, would impact a historic resource on the California registry, would be a health and safety issue, or would violate state or federal law. A height concession is allowable under the state's density bonus program, and in this case does not meet any of the denial criteria. The Community Development Director approved the concession and it being part of the state program, took the height out of ABR's purview. Regardless, as we discussed earlier, the ABR did struggle with the height and commented at every hearing about the height of the project, whether a density bonus concession was being used or not. So the applicant reduced plate heights, and in doing so removed the need for the density bonus concession. The project now meets the city's 48-foot maximum with an overall height of 43 feet, 8.5 inches. Since the density bonus concession is not being used for height, the ABR is within their purview to comment on the height of the project. But the second issue with height concerns is the state's Housing Accountability Act. The law states that a housing project that meets all objective zoning and design standards can only be denied or a condition imposed that reduces density if the two findings on the screen can be made. The city's municipal code is considered an objective design standard, and the project meets the maximum height allowance as outlined in the municipal code. Staff does not consider the height or overall size of the project to be a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety, and therefore did not recommend denial or conditioning of the project. If the ABR or council today were to disapprove the project or condition it in a way that would reduce density, such as removing the fourth story, these findings must be made. Finally, the city is encouraging this kind of development, specifically in the priority housing overlay, which the subject parcel is located within. On the left, you can see a map of pending and approved AUD projects in the area. The subject project is located near the center of the map and shown with a black dot. The other projects currently going through the planning process, some of which have received project design approval but not final approval yet, include a 4-story 36-unit project, a 3-story mixed-use 26-unit project, a 4-story mixed-use 27-unit project, and a 4-story mixed-use 39-unit project. There are 2 projects that have received all necessary planning approvals in the area but have yet to be constructed, and they include a 4-story 78-unit project and a 4-story mixed-use 34-unit project. Finally, there are 3 built AUD projects in the area, a 4-story mixed-use 21-unit project, a 3-story 2-unit project, and a 3-story mixed-use 23-unit project. When discussing the project at the March 20th, 2023 hearing, the ABR noted that the proposed 4-story project is comparable to the other projects pending, approved, and built in the area, as shown in this map. Council has 2 options. If council cannot make the required project compatibility findings, then council may uphold the appeal and state the reasons why the findings cannot be made. The Housing Accountability Act findings related to denying or conditioning a project in a way to reduce density would be required. If council chooses to uphold the ABR's approval of the project and deny the appeal, the compatibility findings identified as Attachment 3 in the council agenda report are required. Staff also recommends that the council find the project exempt from CEQA under categorical exemption 15332. Staff is recommending a motion to deny the appeal as the project is consistent with the city's municipal code and the appeal issues do not constitute a specific health or safety issue required to make the Housing Accountability Act findings. First, staff recommends that council find the project exempt from CEQA under exemption 15332, infill development. The project meets all criteria listed on the screen and no exceptions to the exemption apply to the project. The project does inherently exceed the city's general plan density for the site, which is 63 dwelling units per acre. But with the state density bonus program, it's important to note that the state allows for this. The increased density per state law is allowable and consistent with the city's general plan. The increased density does not mean that an exception to the CEQA exemption is applicable. Finally, staff recommends the appeal be denied and the ABR's approval be upheld. Staff has incorporated additional analysis into the findings that the ABR previously made and were shown a few slides ago, such as including the applicable design guidelines that the project is compatible with and referencing nearby approved and pending projects. Finally, staff has also incorporated the approved density bonus concession related to open space in the ABR findings. That is the conclusion of my presentation, and we are available for questions.
All right, very good. Are there any members of ABR present to add to the presentation? Okay, very good. Some questions from council on this presentation only. Ms. Gutierrez.
This question is for the city attorney. Based on all the findings, if council would not deny the appeal, what are the likelies that we can get sued for not?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, unless the council can make the findings that this project creates a specific adverse impact, then there is a likelihood that under the Housing Accountability Act that the city would face liability. As staff has indicated, this project meets all of our objective zoning and design standards.
Thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. If you could just clarify, well, a couple things. One, under AB 2097, it's referenced in the staff report into parking. So even if we would have had parking requirements, would they be superseded by AB 2097 in this case? Is the project, does it comply with AB 2097? If so, would that supersede any requirements we have?
This project would comply with AB 2097. It was applied for prior to 2097, so it is consistent with both the new state law and our existing AUD project.
And then the issue of cars, since there is no parking, it would be that the ideal would no one would have a car in there. But in the surrounding neighborhood, is there? It's discussed in the staff report, but just wanted clarification on if there would be a way for enforcement within any covenants or anything to require people not to have cars. I know it's different with the Housing Authority project, as you mentioned, but could you clarify in this case why, is that an option?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, private property owners have no way to regulate and enforce whether their tenants have cars. It could be a leasing requirement, but the practicality of enforcing something like that is very difficult because someone could say, well, and I've talked to the Housing Authority on this, and they've had people where they can actually try and flout the rules. And, you can park your car, say I don't have a car, and park it 2 blocks away. You can do the shuffle. You could say it's someone else's car. There's just so many ways. That's why staff doesn't recommend that we ever require that. And in this particular case, ABR does not have that discretion to make those kind of conditions upon a project.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Nedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Do we have other 4-story buildings that have no parking? Has that happened yet?
Councilmember Snedden, if I am correct, we have another project on 425 Garden Street, not 420, this is 425 Santa Barbara, 425 Garden Street. Just received project design approval. It's still going through the process. I'm not 100% sure what the height is on that. Ms. Swanson's pulling it up. But this isn't the first, it's not the first project that we've seen no parking, but I will point out that on the first floor of this particular development, the entire rear is dedicated to bike parking and storage. So I think it's built into the consideration of the floor plan is understanding that, okay, you might not have cars, but people are going to want to get around by bike and need extra storage. And so again, that entire, the closest to the west interior property line is bike storage and other storage.
And then I think I understand that that would not be in the purview of ABR, but honestly, in one of our last appeal hearings, I was surprised to hear that council could make recommendations or other findings. And before we hear from either side, I just want to be framing that as I'm listening, whether it's in our purview or not.
Mayor Rouse, Council Member Sneddon, in this case, I would say, no, that would be a complete redesign. If that's the way you want to go, then I would recommend that you just uphold the appeal. But keeping in mind, however, you're going to have to make those specific adverse health and safety findings that could not be mitigated.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
Sorry, one more question. On the covenants for the affordable units, how long are those? How many years are they for?
90 for AUD and 55 for state density bonus.
So 90 for the AUD and then 55. Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. If there are no further questions, we'll move on to the appellant. Mr. Capello, you have 20 minutes, and once again, just to remind you, you may use it all now, or you may reserve some for rebuttal. We'll track it up here. There'll be a counter on the,
Very good.
in front of you.
And if you might hold up one second. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Was that?
I'm just going to retake attendance, so something else will show on the screen before we get started with that presentation as well. And this is not a vote on the item. This is merely showing who is present at the meeting. All right. Is this your presentation?
Yeah, do you mind
Okay.
if I just get it set up?
Absolutely.
And just let us know when you're ready to begin.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, may I begin?
You may.
I'm Barry Capello. Many of you may not know, but I sat in that chair for 7 years, from 1971 to 1977. I can say probably more than anybody that I recognize how difficult your job is and the number of things that you deal with every day, not only from being the city attorney, but from living in the city or within a half a mile of the city for the last 50 years. I drive every day down Las Positas and see the project that you did there. The roundabout at the bottom of the Las Positas and Cliff. I mean, wonderful. You do great work, and it's tough. And why am I talking to you? Because you did not hear from me ex parte, because we don't lobby the council for or against developments. You've never seen me here. Maybe some of you might have seen me at district elections, but that's not what we do in my firm. I'll make a brief presentation about what I call the big issues, and my associate who's been with us 7 years, Mr. Lloyd, will give you the details. I have to implore you to understand that all the things that you do, there are things that are of greater importance, and you have to decide just how important they are. This is one of those issues. Why am I doing this, and why is Mr. Sims doing it? Mr. Sims is a very substantial real estate investor, lives in Los Angeles half the time and half the time here. He doesn't want to build a 4-story, wall-to-wall, no parking development next door to this. But I guarantee you that if this project is allowed, Mr. Sims will have the ability to do exactly the same thing based on the general law that any project in an area that's similar to one in the same zoning has the same right to it as well. What shocks me is that I saw on one of the slides from your planning department, the La Cumbre density for the Macy's project, which is a fine project. But I know that the city attorney had mentioned to the city that there's a charter limit on height. And I know those developers, and I think they are going to come in and claim, and they may well have a good claim, that the state trumps that. But that's precedent now that your planning department put it here. And what does that mean? A state law that applies to Coalinga and Stockton applies to Santa Barbara, yes, but within the guidelines of the other state laws. CEQA. Now, this is a very unusual process where the appellant goes after the developer. Right? The developer made developer's presentation right there. The staff gave you the developer doesn't have to say anything. So I'm here to deal with what the staff said, and you know what? I'm not even going to talk about it. I'll tell you why. Because what we did when I was the city attorney is we reduced the density in the city, and the ultimate effect of it, by the way, may well have been the current housing crisis. But why was it done? The city council did it because of the sewer capacity, the water capacity, the traffic in the city at the time, and they decided that something had to be done to make sure the general plan of 150,000 wasn't built out. And exactly the opposite is happening here. And this staff, these young people, are going to impose upon this city a canyon based upon no CEQA, based upon, they didn't answer your question, are there any other projects that have been approved with no parking? The answer is no. This is going to be your first. And my client's parking lot is not going to be allowed for it. And when I heard them say that they've talked to Public Works and they've talked to Building, we've never talked to them. And now apparently somebody at the staff, we don't know who it was, said, oh, construction's going to be okay. Think about 4 stories, almost lot line to lot line, where cranes are needed, trucks are needed. Where are they going to be? They're not going to be on my client's property. We're not going to allow it. They're going to be in the street? Is that what you want up and down Haley Street? This is very precedent setting. And Mr. Sims, he's asked me to do this, and I thought about it, you know, why am I coming down to talk to the council? And I'd hope that I could talk to you on the larger scale about what is happening here. Your city attorney said something which isn't quite correct. You've got handcuffs on your ABR. It doesn't go from the ABR to the Planning Commission, where usually these things are then vetted. There's no environmental review here, where usually these things are vetted. These ladies and the staff at the ABR are the ones that generate this report. And the ABR, some of the members went, we don't like this, but you mean we can't consider parking and we can't consider how they build it? No, you can't. All you can consider how it looks. And each and every one of you then are the ones responsible for what ultimately happens when in all your other projects, you have the right to look at a CEQA analysis, you have a right to have your planning department, your planning commission give you recommendations. You don't have that here. I think that's the fault of the process, and you've handcuffed your citizens by so doing it. Not your fault. That's the process here. CEQA, as you'll see, requires an analysis, and Mr. Lloyd will go through that with you. I ask you, please consider what you're ultimately going to do. Not allowing buildings, as the city council did back in my day, ultimately created a problem that we have today. But we don't have something that has to be torn down. We don't have a canyon of 4-story buildings with no parking, with the guys, the joke that these people aren't going to own cars or drive cars. What are we kidding ourselves? Is that pure sophistry? They're all going to ride bikes and walk? Please. So the answer is, this is your job. Because in the end, I'll be long gone, but in the end, what's this town going to look like? And somebody is going to ultimately say, it was this council that did the right thing or the wrong thing. This is the wrong thing for Santa Barbara. Mr. Sims, he knows it is, and he's only asked me to come here to point this out to you. And finally, to answer a question Ms. Gutierrez asked, will we be sued? The city attorney said by the developer. She didn't answer whether or not there would be a lawsuit from the appellant. I'm not saying there is, but I'm saying there are grounds for one. Mr. Lloyd, how much time did we use, Mr. Mayor?
8 minutes.
Thank you.
Plenty of time. Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse, council members. For those of you I met yesterday, it's nice to see you again. For those who I didn't, it's a pleasure to meet you today. First of all, I have just a few issues regarding the staff's claim of a CEQA exemption, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit of detail. Staff first pointed out that this project, in order to be exempt, has to be consistent with the general plan, and I'm going to show you why it's not. And staff also pointed out there must be no significant effects on issues including traffic and air quality, and I'll show you why that's a problem too. And there are also two CEQA issues where an exemption cannot be applied, and that's where the project and successive projects of the same type in the same place will have a cumulative impact. And that takes a project outside the scope of a CEQA exemption, and I'll show you why that's the case too. So let's take a look at this project on the ground. Now, you've had an opportunity to visit Councilmember Gutierrez. I trust you're familiar with the area. I believe this is your district. What we have here clockwise, these are the surrounding photos of the surrounding region. This is looking west towards State Street, east towards Milpas, south towards the freeway, and north. And in this fourth photo, this is the appellant's project here, and in front of it is this 0.2 acre parcel where the project is going to be. Now, what you'll also see if you were there yesterday or if you've driven by is there is a serious lack of street parking, and as these photos show and as the conditions on the ground show. So for the CEQA exemption, there's discussion about the general plan. So let's look at that. This is the 2011 general plan. For those of you who participated, are familiar with it, it involves a lot of work. There's a lot of stakeholder input. There's detailed analysis from consultants, from city staff. An awful lot of consideration goes into this. And when that plan came out, the Haley Street corridor was designated at 15 to 27 dwelling units per acre. What does that mean? It means 3 to 5 housing units. Now, let's go to 2020. This is where we have the priority housing overlay in place, and which doubles the allowable density to 37 to 63 dwelling units. What does that mean? 7 to 13 units. And here's the problem that the city faces, both on a larger scale as well as for this specific project. Both the general plan, the zoning ordinance, and every environmental assessment that was performed expected this 63 dwellings to be the absolute max density. And we've included some excerpts in the housing, in the handout that makes it very clear there was never any consideration that projects would exceed this density. And remember, the infill exemption is not available for projects that are inconsistent with the general plan policies. In addition, there's been a number of circumstances that have changed. In the 2011 plan, it anticipated that the city was going to initiate formal neighborhood planning efforts, including specifically the Haley and Gutierrez corridors. Fast forward a decade, there's been no outreach or planning efforts. And I recall in 2020, Councilmember Sneddon, you objected specifically to the removal of the outreach efforts in the 2020 ordinance. In addition, we've seen MTD service continue to decline. the local bus stop that services this project, there is one bus stop that provides one route that stops once an hour. That's insufficient for the current population, let alone what's being projected here. And in addition, you face the loss of the Haley commuter lot to the police station, further increasing the impact on parking. And when the 2020 ordinance was put in place, the city had a grand plan to introduce an unbundled parking system that would allow developers to lease the public parking spaces. As I understand it, that program has been abandoned. It's dead in the water. That's not going to help anyone. So what is the end result? With the state bonus law applied to the priority housing ordinance, there is a 10-block by 2-block area from State to Milpas that conceivably could have 10,000 housing units within the zoning ordinance. And that's housing between 10 and 20,000 people. That's almost 3 times what the general plan expected to be added over the entirety of that future blueprint and development. That's why this infill exemption is not applicable, because there is a significant cumulative impact. There's going to be countless cars circulating the block looking for parking spaces. There's going to be an increase in traffic. There's going to be a negative impact on emissions and air quality. That's why the infill exemption doesn't apply. And it's why an EIR should be performed. Next, I'm going to talk about the staff's comments on the ABR and the design. So as we have it, this is the proposed project. There's no on-site parking, and there's a 3-foot interior setback. Now, lack of on-site parking. This is the controversial one, and you'll recognize a comment there from our mayor, recognizing the reality that we may wish for autonomous vehicles. That's not the case. We're going to have people fighting for parking spaces. We also disagree, well, or rather, the purview of the ABR and the purview for the city council is to consider neighborhood compatibility. The zoning ordinance, whether it's height, setbacks, or parking, these set the envelope for what is permissible, but they don't determine what is compatible. Now, we disagree with staff that it would be impossible to require lease covenants, because landlords govern the conduct of their tenants all the time, whether it's the number of occupants, whether it's any number of conditions which can be enforced by the landlord and here should be enforced. And in the same way, the developer is required to report on affordability or report on being prevented from operating as an STR, then in the same way, the developer could impose a lease covenant. Now, we also disagree that the feasibility of construction or ongoing maintenance is not within the purview of either the ABR or the council. Quite simply, it's how will this project practically impact the neighboring properties? And our client, as Mr. Capello pointed out, is a very experienced real property developer, and the comments we provided in the handout, they come from his experience. There are serious questions here, both about the feasibility of construction and the ongoing maintenance. And from the outset, there's been no outreach to the neighboring property. And I believe at the start, it was just assumed that there would be access through our property. As Mr. Capello pointed out, that's clearly not going to be the case. And finally, on the mass, bulk, and scale, I think it's evident this project is going to tower over the surrounding properties. There are no other properties in the surrounding neighborhood that are like this project. There are no 4 stories built with no on-site parking. This project will set the tone for future development. And as Mr. Capello amply pointed out, every single property that you have designated as this housing overlay will also have the opportunity to take the state bonus law and build a series of canyonized developments spanning State to Milpas. And I'll leave you with the comment of Board Member Whelan, who I think got it precisely right. The project does not complement existing buildings, nor is it cohesive in height, scale, or character. Its livability and quality of life for residents is questionable, if not negligible. And so that's why we believe you should approve this appeal We believe you should find the CEQA infill exemption to be inapplicable and require an environmental analysis to be performed. And on a broader scale, too, the city has to evaluate and reevaluate its current environmental analysis that fully takes into account the impact of state bonus density laws. Thank you.
All right, very good. You have 2 minutes and 20 seconds in reserve for rebuttal, and we'll now go to the applicant. Reset the clock, please, Madam Clerk. And Mr. Gorn, when you are prepared, let us know. And just to let the crowd know that after the applicant's presentation, we're going to take a short translator break.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. I'm Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning, and I represent the owners and developers of 425 Santa Barbara Street. And wow, that's a lot to unpack, what we just heard. My whole presentation was just going to focus on two issues, the neighborhood context and construction, because that was all brought up. But after hearing that presentation, I think the main thing I want to point out is we heard probably 10, 12 minutes about CEQA and CEQA compliance and all this. This is a subject that was never raised at a single ABR hearing by this appellant. 5 hearings. Mr. Capello was city attorney for 7 years. He knew about CEQA. I mean, I assume he knows about CEQA. He could have raised this issue at any time, and they never did. And the reason the municipal code prohibits introducing new evidence at a city council hearing in these design review board hearings is precisely so that you can't show up at the 11th hour and start raising new arguments that nobody beforehand had an opportunity to address. And that's half of their 20-minute presentation that we just heard. I think your staff addressed it, and I think your staff did a really thorough and effective job debunking this appeal. So I don't feel like I have to go through and address all of the appeal points at all. I'm just going to talk about a couple of things. I figured it was possible Mr. Capello would threaten to sue you, so there's things I want to put in the record here that would help support your findings to deny this appeal. So let's start off with neighborhood context. And I'm actually going to start with the appellant's exhibit here. Also, by the way, something that was never presented before the ABR and could have been at any time. So what we would have been able to say, and why am I talking about it? It's in your agenda packet. So you've seen it. You can't unring the bell. So I'm going to address it so it's on the administrative record here. This is a really interesting way to have photographed and presented this neighborhood. So let's start with a few things. Here's Haley Street looking towards the mountains, and this is the appellant's representation of the neighborhood. But what's over here? What would happen if you turned your head to the right? Would you see this? The appellant's property, 2 feet setback from the street, and yeah, it's a 2-story building, but it's the height of a 3-story building. And that's what you see from the street. And I'm not placing a value judgment on whether that's good or bad. It simply is. That's what exists out there. What happens what's next door to that? We've got this building. I mean, this is the streetscape on Haley. This is the neighborhood. And I think it's funny that I even have to argue about this because everybody knows this. Everybody in this room, we live in Santa Barbara. We know this neighborhood. We know what it looks like. It's not this low-key suburban pastoral place. This is an urban area around here. We'll look at their next picture. This is looking down Santa Barbara Street towards Gutierrez. And let's see here. There we go. Our project would be up in here. I mean, one thing this photo does show is how these trees existing, not even on our property, effectively would screen our whole project from this view, if you were looking at it. But what's over here? This, a big box store, one of the largest buildings in downtown Santa Barbara, and then whatever that thing is on the corner. So here's our next photo. How do you make a really large 2-story building that's the height of a 3-story building look small? Take a photo from it from a long distance. what's this? What's casting this shadow right here? Is it this on the appellant's property, also set back about 3 feet from the street? Yeah, that's a one-story building, but it's about 20 feet tall. These aren't, I think when they're saying 1- and 2-story buildings, they're making it sound like this is this like residential scale neighborhood with like 1- and 2-story houses, but that's not what we've got going on here. We have 1- or 2-story buildings, but they look like this. And that's a 4-story building right back there, right next door. We didn't hear any mention of that. What's over here? That's our neighbor across the street, a 1-story building. But, you know, this tower element here, that's taller than our 3rd story. I mean, this is reality. Everybody knows this. They've all seen this. So these are the photos the ABR reviewed that we actually did present during the hearings, and I want to present them again here so you know what the ABR was looking at when they made their decision to approve this project. So there's our project site. You know, what's going on here? Do we have 3- 4-story buildings on one lot right here next to the, you know, applicant's property? I mean, the appellant's property. Also, take a look at this setback. I'll be talking about that a little bit more later. Here's another view looking towards the east. Again, this is the appellant's property. Get a good look at that building elevation and setback. And then, of course, their next door neighbors repeating the same sort of pattern. Okay, here we are looking west across our neighbor from across the street. And then this is looking straight down, and we showed this photo at a hearing, and I just want to use this to orient you towards the photos that we showed. And, you know, we weren't super selective on our photos. We took pictures of the buildings that are next door to our site, the same way you would see them if you were on the street. So that's our property. Here's 417 Santa Barbara, the platform. There it is. It used to have some more ivy on it. You can see the 4-story development in the back. That's, I think, Robin Donaldson's development. I don't know if he lives there, but he did that development. I know his office is there. This is 126 East Haley, the platform. Again, you know, sure, it's a 2-story building, but I mean, there's 2-story buildings, and then there's 2-story buildings with an exclamation point, I guess. Next, we've got 136 East Haley. So that's the tire store that's next to us. And then across the street, we've got the Smart and Final. And this is what the ABR is looking at when they look at the immediate surroundings of our project. And that's just the immediate surroundings. So if you go and you take our project and put it onto this photo to look at the scale of it and how it lays out with the pattern of development, it fits the pattern of development. Let's talk about setbacks real quick, because this photo illustrates them really well. So our project is going to be the only building on this side of the street that actually has setbacks on all 4 sides of it. Most of the buildings have at least one 0-foot setback, and that's kind of the norm throughout the neighborhood. And it's just, I've thought this from the very beginning. It's just interesting to me that this appellant is like really concerned about our 3-foot setbacks when, you know, this is their property. They have 33,000 square feet of development on this property, and all of it is up against a 0-foot setback on all of their neighbors' properties. So this is our neighborhood. And again, everybody knows this is the neighborhood. This is the central business district. Our property is part of the central business district. The city created the regulations that allow exactly for the type of project that the ABR approved here, because it's in the central business district, because it's surrounded by large buildings and many tall buildings and 4-story buildings next door to us. I mean, that's what's going on here. And it's just, again, I think it's weird to have to even be arguing about this. So we got all this stuff about construction. And I guess Mr. Sims has experience in it. My client, Ed St. George, has a little bit of experience in construction too. So I'm just going to show you how it works. I mean, this isn't an issue for this project. It's completely outside the purview of the ABR, which begs the question why this appellant has spent pages and pages arguing that it's some sort of a basis to deny the project. But I'm just going to show you how it works. So, and let me also say that there's never been an assumption that we could get access to our property over this appellant's property. We've built a lot of projects, and I've done tons of projects besides the ones I've worked on with Ed, and you never assume you're going to have access over somebody else's property to build yours, and nobody that's done even 1 or 2 developments would ever think that. So it's strange to keep hearing that come up. So in any case, here's our property. As Public Works pointed out, we've got a big courtyard in our design, which gives us a big on-site staging area, and things can be delivered there. They can be staged there. You can move things into the vacant areas that you have framed up in the property. You know, when people drop off a pallet of sheetrock or lumber, it doesn't sit out there for a month. It gets immediately pulled up and put into the building and erected. That's how you build projects. There's this, you know, what if there has to be a big delivery or something, and you know, they need to use, I guess they kept using a reaching forklift in their supplemental materials. But I don't know, maybe this happens. This is Peter Lewis's project over in the old Staples parking lot, and this was yesterday when I was riding my bike back from the site visit. And you know, what's going on here? Well, the lane's closed down because they have a 100-foot concrete pumper truck sitting there pumping concrete into the back of the lot. And, you know, they didn't have to go across their neighbor's property to get that concrete in there. You don't have to actually drive a cement truck onto the property. We have this kind of technology nowadays, and they do this, and they close the street down. And if you could, this was a little bit higher resolution, that sign there says sidewalk closed, and the pedestrians go to the other side of the street and use the sidewalk there. So that, I mean, that's what happens in real life. And you know, this idea that, well, you know, how could we build this part of the project without getting access across the neighbor's property? Well, this crazy way of coming across our property line and just walking back here and building it that way. That's how you build a building like this. You know, here's the neighborhood, here's the platform. You know, how did they build this at a 0 setback? How did these guys do this? Or how did these guys do this over here? Or how did the entire platform itself get built this way and has been here all these years and continues to get maintained this way with a 0 setback? Will we ever know? Because everybody does this all the time. This is a normal way to build things out in an urban area. It's not some novel concept that's coming up for the first time on our project. How are these guys doing this? This is the housing project, housing authority project that's right next down to Dune Coffee. There's a 4-story building on an urban infill lot that it's going up just fine. I haven't heard of any, you know, major disasters that have occurred because of this project. I mean, here's what we're talking about. We've got 0 setbacks. We've got a peninsula of 0 setbacks on 3 sides. And this building doesn't have any internal courtyards on its side or anything, yet somehow they managed to erect this structure. And I can't believe I'm arguing about this, but anyway, this is what we're here talking about now. And that's how you construct a building like that. Yes, when you build a large building in a downtown area, there are going to be short-term construction impacts. You might have to close the sidewalk a couple times, or more than a couple times. You might have to shut down the street a couple times, and you've got to get permits to do that. We can't just decide to do it whenever we feel like it. We have to go through the city, and they have to approve our plans, and then we do it. The housing ferry doesn't drop off housing projects at night with no impacts. You have to build them, and the community accepts that, and it's a short-term impact, and we get a long-term benefit out of it in terms of the housing units we get. And this is what's going to have to happen with all of the housing projects that the city is counting on getting in the downtown area to meet your obligations under the state housing law and regional housing needs assessment. So people need to become comfortable with how you build these, and we've been doing these for decades, and I think you can be very comfortable with it. So that's my presentation, and I can answer any questions you might have.
All right, Mr. Gardner, very good. You have, you have 6 minutes and 11 seconds left. Mr. Capello, are you prepared for rebuttal, or would you like to wait till after break? I'll give you the choice.
I want you all to be happy and ready to listen.
Well, we appreciate that, but I actually think we can probably go ahead and fit in your rebuttal and obviously the applicant's rebuttal after yours, if you'd like. So if you're prepared to go ahead, let's go ahead and do that.
I'm prepared so long as you're not wiggling in your chair.
They still seem pretty.
I'm not wiggling, but the timer might be, because you have 2:20, according to what I've got. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, if you'd reset the clock, please, for Mr. Capello. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council. Did you see the pictures? Oh, we saw those pictures. There was parking on all those properties. There was cars parked on the private properties. And what he said today, which really struck me, is the city allowed this, so we did it, or words to that effect. And that's the issue. You handcuffed the ABR, and they forgot to tell you the ABR was not allowed to consider that there wasn't going to be any parking. That wasn't allowed. You can't talk about that ABR. Oh, CEQA, you can't talk about that. So your process, the way they've interpreted it, and we've shown you through Mr. Lloyd, you can't do it that way. They've interpreted it. You get this bonus on top of a bonus, and the result is the canyonization of your city on your watch. You have currently the right to make these decisions. Make them judiciously. Use the tools that you have. You have the right to consider size, bulk, and scale. You have the right to consider parking. You have the right to consider setbacks. You could look at an argument that you just heard and said, you know, I did see off-street parking on all those properties. You know, developers have the right to come in and ask for what they think they have a right to. I'm not saying there's something wrong with that. It's the result that's wrong. It's the monstrosity that's built. Your staff, they have a zealous duty for housing, but they can't think about the future because they're all young. I'm telling you, I've been in this city for almost 50 years. You have to protect it. It's not Coalinga. It's a beautiful spot. Don't let the way they've interpreted and their zealousness to get housing cause you to have bicycles that these tenants are going to be pleased. You can't possibly believe that. You have the power. You have the authority. We raised the issues before you. The ones we could have raised, we were told we can't raise in front of the ABR.
End of time.
Thank you, Mr. Capello.
You're welcome.
Mr. Gorin, you have 6 minutes and 11 seconds left, if you choose to use them.
Yeah, so, yes, Mr.
Wait
Capello.
a second, till we get the
Pause
timer
1
on.
minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Mr. Capello is correct that the city spends a lot of time coming up with rules about what you want to have come on the ground, and we follow the rules. And so does every other developer that's trying to do things in this city. And, you know, there's a lot of rules. It's not like it's a cakewalk to get a development project through and get a project designer approval at ABR, especially a project like this. So if people can't rely on the rules, if your council was to take an action today that let the development community know that you don't stand up for the rules and processes that you adopt, that's going to have a pretty chilling effect. And, you know, not to sound flippant, but good luck getting the housing that all of you talk about is so important. I mean, we're the people that deliver it. We need to be able to count on you. Thanks.
All right, very good. And with that, we will go ahead and take our break. And we will reconvene right at 4:30. And after that time, we'll go back to staff, and after that, we'll go to council questions and public comment. Reconvene. Thank you for your patience. So at this point in time, we're going to go to, back to city staff if they want to respond to anything that was said during those testimonies. Then we'll go to questions from council to staff and/or appellant or applicant. And after that, we'll do public comment. And after that, deliberation. So, to city staff. Ms. Ostranger.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Two things I'd like to respond to. First, the discussion about whether we're setting a precedent with approving this project. And then I'll move on to letting Ms. Peugeot talk about CEQA and the appellant's CEQA arguments, and I can supplement if I need to. But with regards to the process, are we setting a precedent? Yes, we're setting a precedent by following our ordinance and upholding or denying the appeal. The precedent has been set when the council approved by supermajority to set these zoning standards, the height in this priority overlay, the no parking requirement, and the setbacks. That is what, as Mr. Gorin said, the council agreed to allow. Under the Housing Accountability Act, we are required to follow those objective design standards unless we can find that there is a significant impact to health and safety that cannot be mitigated. If council can make those findings, then they can uphold the appeal. However, based on what the state has done in saying under AB 2097 that projects within a half a mile of the transit districts do not require parking, I think it's really hard to say that traffic and parking is a health and safety issue. The state law, yes, it has constrained us under the Housing Accountability Act, but we've also set that ceiling, that level of what we've said is acceptable in this area. What we've said, we want development to be here. And what we've said to developers is, you can build at this height and you don't need to have parking. And the developers are submitting projects based on that, and that height, those setbacks, that no parking, that affects the density that they can propose to ABR and to the city for approval. And the state has now said, okay, that's what you said is okay, now you can't take it back. So that's just in general with that. I'll let Ms. Peugeot speak to CEQA. And I'm not trying to make the argument for the applicants or the appellants. I just want to be clear on what the state law is telling us and what we've told ourselves and we've told the citizens of Santa Barbara.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor Rouse and council members. My name is Julia Peugeot, and I am the Community Development environmental analyst. I coordinate environmental and CEQA review for development applications. And staff reviewed this project for compliance with CEQA and determined that this project qualifies for a CEQA exemption under Class 32 infill development exemptions. Under the Class 32 infill development exemption, if a project meets a certain set of criteria outlined in the CEQA guidelines, a project may qualify. The exceptions to using this exemption is if there is an unusual circumstance related to the project, and if that circumstance would result in a potentially significant environmental impact. The set of criteria used to qualify for this exemption includes consistency with the general plan and general plan policies. And as Ms. Swanson showed in the presentation, there's a government code that states that general plans do not need to be amended to implement the state density bonus. Therefore, it's inferred that general plan consistency also includes state density bonus. There's been several projects in the city that have used state density bonus. And state density bonus in of itself is not considered an unusual circumstance, and staff have not been presented with evidence that this project on this site with the state density bonus would result in a significant environmental impact. Related to the different resources, traffic being one of them, traffic and parking, this project site is located in what's called a transit priority zone. And in the CEQA statute, under Public Resources Code 21099, the statute specifies that parking impacts, transportation impacts, and aesthetic impacts are not to be considered significant CEQA impacts. And the transportation priority area is defined in the CEQA guidelines, and it's also mapped by SBCAG. And staff confirmed that this project is in transport priority area. Let's see. Related to air quality, the Air Pollution Control District can set a screening table that determines when projects should be screened and conduct an air quality study to determine if they might potentially be above criteria pollutant thresholds. Under APCD's guidance, that threshold is somewhere around the construction of maybe 200 units or more, and this project is way below that. And so therefore, it's inferred that air quality impacts would be below those criteria set by APCD for air pollutants. Let's see. I believe that is all my notes on the CEQA points, and I am happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, with that, we will go to council questions of staff and/or applicant or appellant. Alejandra Gutierrez.
Question for Mr. Gordon. Would your client would be willing, let me just give you a little bit of, my train of thought here. I understand that the city is provided us with the evidence that this project is being moving forward because you guys checked the boxes and you guys are following our rules and the state rules. Yet again, in Santa Barbara, we have this issue of too many cars, no parking, and it was bound to happen, right? Would your client consider having something on their lease voluntarily, because I know we can't demand this, but where they would say something like, I voluntarily, I'm not going to have a car, something like that, to the fact where, yes, we can't control people having cars or not, and this project seems that it's being built for people that want to live in the downtown area, want to use their bikes, want to use public transportation, would your client be willing to have something like that in their lease?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, I think staff covered this really well, and that's like a slippery slope I don't want to get into because it's completely unenforceable. And I mean, we could say, yeah, sure, we'll do it, but even in asking the question, you're acknowledging that there's really no way for us to do it. So rather than say we're going to do something that isn't going to do anything, I'd rather just not agree to do that.
Thank you, and I totally understand your answer, but I'm asking this question because I know there's people in the public that are saying, why can't you enforce it? Why are you allowing these projects to move forward? But you just explained it, and I think the staff did a really good job, and so thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Ms. Sneddon?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. So for staff, when we're looking at transportation zones, and what makes the definition of one, and if the transportation isn't sufficient, so say along a corridor, and I have no way of checking at this moment whether it is once every hour and that's it, or what the locations are, and I know, on the weekends there isn't transportation, so what is the threshold for sufficient transportation to be a transportation corridor?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, the statute and the CEQA guidelines calls it a transit priority area, and that is a half-mile buffer around a major transit stop. And Santa Barbara is identified of having 2 major transit stops that meet that, including the Amtrak station and the Carrillo bus terminal.
So those are the 2, half-mile
Yes.
within either the train station or the Carrillo transit stop?
Yes, correct.
And this project is within half a mile?
Yes.
I would be surprised if it was. I would say that. Okay, and so that is the definition. So I guess actually a lot hinges on that definition. And, you have a map of the zone and the project area. Okay, and then a question about CEQA and these cumulative effects, which I actually found very compelling. And the argument that it's a multiplier with a cumulative effect, that you have a 10 by 2 block, that you could have 10,000 units by state density bonus, and when would we look at the cumulative effects by CEQA of that?
Councilmember Sneddon, I want to clarify that the CEQA analysis performed for this particular project did not rely on the 2011 General Plan EIR. That is a separate process. We relied on the infill exemption, which is the set of criteria. But to answer your question, the city is currently undergoing preparation of the housing element EIR and the cumulative air quality resource impacts related to cumulative construction of more housing units will be analyzed in that EIR.
Okay, which is underway. And then I just want to confirm that there were other, I think I know this, but I want to confirm there were, in those aerial shots, there were, in the other 4-story building or other buildings, did all of those have associated parking? I guess, I don't know who would be the expert on that, but.
So Councilmember Sneddon, so each project might be a little bit different because when they were approved, there were probably slightly different zoning regulations at the time. I mean, even in the since I started working here in 2018, the AUD incentive program has changed and the parking requirements differed. And so this project doesn't require parking. And so it takes advantage of that incentive in order to create more housing. I think, again, the conflict at ABR, I mean, I'm very adamant in trying to direct the ABR and all of our design review boards to stay in their lane, to make sure that they're looking at the aesthetics, the project compatibility, the neighborhood context, because those issues are off the table. Those are objective standards that developers and applicants have to adhere to. And so we don't tell them, but it doesn't mean that, they try to bring it up and it's a question, and we recognize that that's challenging. But again, this project meets all the objective criteria that that this council has approved, and that we've seen. What it's not, I don't have specific numbers, but what we're seeing is that, again, more and more bike storage facilities are being provided on site because of the realization of, it's not just a bicycle, but it's an e-bike, and I need a little bit more storage. And, what is the rationale? But it is the central business district, it's the priority housing overlay. And so this was just not a place where parking is required, but yes, there's tension there, and that can be recognized. But again, the incentive for housing is the reason why we see these development projects happening.
And then could you step me through how it gets to be 4 stories? Which rules are being applied for it to be getting to 4 stories?
Mayor Rouse and Councilwoman, there's a 48-foot maximum height limitation for AUD projects in the priority housing overlay. And so you could theoretically have 1 story that's 48 feet tall, or you could adjust plate heights as the applicant has done and get 3 stories or 4 stories.
So it's within the height limit in the AUD high priority housing overlay?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Most of my questions are answered. I just have one, and it's a larger issue, but it gets back to the parking, or the lack of parking and the impacts. Is this a neighborhood that we could, down the line, look at a residential parking program for units? Because that would seem to be a way that you could address this. But is that something that could be maybe addressed through the housing element update when we're looking at things like that?
Councilmember Friedman, unfortunately, I don't have transportation staff here. I know that it is applied in certain parts of the city, but very restricted. And so I would be concerned about trying to answer on behalf of our transportation staff.
And that's fine. That's kind of what I thought the answer was be, and it's not something I can consider in terms of today's deliberations, but I think the issue was raised that there are going to be projects that have no parking in neighborhoods. So it is something overall that another conversation is looking at the residential parking permit program to help address these issues, but that's down the line. So thank you.
All right, very good. With that, we'll go to public comment before we go to deliberations. Start out with Robin Donaldson. And Mr. Donaldson, you have 3 minutes at the podium.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Rouse, honorable council members. My name's Robin Donaldson. I'm an architect, and I live at 412 Anacapa Street. So I actually live in the central business district, in your district, and within the priority housing overlay. I built my 3 buildings on that property. Mr. Gorland showed some photos of it. Mine are the buildings that he was calling 4 stories. They're actually 3 stories of living area with a 4th story of a deck up on top and a stair access to that deck. And yes, we provided all the parking for it, but I got that approved in 2015. Interesting afternoon. I think my letter, which I hope you all had a chance to read, as an architect, I look at this project and I look at other projects that are coming down the pike in the community. And I think we have an issue with courtyards in these buildings. If an applicant's coming with state bonus density, wanting height, wanting units, okay, fine. I think we all struggle with the fact that, yes, we need the housing. But that doesn't mean we're obligated to provide courtyards. And courtyards, frankly, are an amenity to the developer and to the users, within the project. But they add mass and bulk to the buildings. And in the case we're looking at today, that courtyard is almost 30 feet wide. the width of the street is, I don't know, 90 feet, something like that. That's a third of the width of the building being given to the interior of the building, basically just air. If you took that and you collapsed it, and I made these comments, by the way, to the ABR, and they were sympathetic, but if you took that and collapsed that, you'd have a lot of issues we're dealing with today addressed, which have to do with the setbacks, the impact on Mr. Sims' property, which, by the way, I am sympathetic to Mr. Capello's arguments and to Mr. Sims' concerns, parking and so on. But I think we have a simple issue here that doesn't preclude housing and the mandates of the state, but has a big impact on the community and the visual impact of these buildings. So my comment is specific to this project, but also a general comment about all the projects that you may be seeing in appeals and that your boards and your commissions are looking at. So maybe there's some advisory comment that could come from the council. I think it would have a lot of weight to make, be at least aware of it. Let your staff is very able, by the way, and your boards are very able to, address this issue and just keep an eye out for this. So appreciate all the issues that we're all dealing with, the pressure for the housing and the work that the staff is doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will Vasquez?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for your time. And my name is Will Vasquez. I was born here in Cottage Hospital in 1985. And I appreciate everybody. And we have bigger issues to deal with, guys. And you know that. And you know what the definition of an atrocity is, is if you see something wrong, if you see somebody hurting on the street, and you don't do anything about it, that's an atrocity. If you're just doing what everybody else tells you, because that's the norm. That's not right. We need to stand up and do what's right. And it's simple. Everything's been screwed up, and you know it. You all know it. And you all are cool. I could tell all of you are beautiful and cool. We need to keep it real, and we need to bring the world back to realness, And it's not just for God, which it is too, and for Mother Earth, but it's simple. It's not like religion has got it all screwed up too. It's simple. It's love thy neighbor as you love thyself, Love everybody. Love, 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 love. It's a win-win-win situation. And also, I personally don't, I think that's a good idea to, to not have cars. I hate cars personally. I mean, I like fast ones and stuff, but we need to do something about that. We need to bring back horses. We need to grow alfalfa and dandelions and hemp and do things the right way. And I'm on a mission from God himself, believe it or not, and herself, the queen. I love her. But I just want to say, I love you all. Let's take care of each other. Let's bring back love. Love, 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 love. For reals, And as long as you have anything in your pocket, you help these, because there's hurting people on the street, hurting old ladies out there, good people, my friends. And we need to be responsible for that, guys, honestly. I love you all, really. And I know we're going to do it. I know the end already, where it's all good. But, love you guys. Sorry.
Thank you. All right, very good. It's back to council for deliberations. Anybody want to deliberate? I'm waiting for you. Okay, Mike. Mr. Jordan.
Force me. So I'll just cut to the chase. I don't have any problem finding to deny the appeal, and I'll talk about how I get there for that. I was most teased by the argument of the general plan being contradictory to implemented state law and having to comply with the general plan to approve the project. That was very imaginative. And generally, I think you don't need to worry about those kids over there. You need to worry about this kid right here. I haven't been here as long as you. But I do have on my resume being the third of 5 generations to live in our house in Santa Barbara. And it's my kids that I'm worried about and my grandkids and where they're going to live and work in Santa Barbara that really frames the way I look at it. I am zealous about housing. This council and multiple councils before that have worked their way through to designate specific areas in this city where it's certain to cause tension with heights and parking and traffic, and the give back on that is they are in transit corridors or they are close to downtown. They will begin to repopulate downtown. They will be people living there, and if they have cars, driving out of the city, which is much less bothersome in the big picture than all of those who are driving into the city. And I think it's to focus on this one project as if this one is all things bad in that regard is just not really a point that I would take. So I think the project has done exactly what we've asked of it and more. They've lowered the height of the building when they didn't have to. They've complied with the rules and the requirements that we've put down for this specific location. And this specific location didn't used to be one of these specific locations. The action was taken to come back in and make an effort to include the Haley Corridor area as the high overlay, high density overlay, specifically to benefit housing and the generation of housing in a specific location. And I've done this on Planning Commission, I'll do it here too. If you're looking at a place that has no parking, you won't, and you have a car, and you want to have a car, you won't select that place to work or live. And if you are going to select that place to live, you'll go look for a place to lease a car on a private lot or in a city parking structure. This particular location is a little unique in that there is even no place to cause a ruckus surrounding this location because there's no parking on the streets around it, literally. You would have to walk 2 blocks just to try to park somewhere else. And I don't think a reasonable renter would do that. I think it will predominantly be people without cars that are mobile either on the transit system, on bicycles, or use the downtown corridor as their place of mobility. Or there will be people who, a minority of people who do have cars but look to place those cars on lots elsewhere. So I can deny the appeal and uphold the Architectural Board of Review's findings plus the recommended findings for CEQA and the additional recommended findings that are on the back page for ABR, related to ABR in the staff recommendations. And I think this project, even more than some others that I've seen both here and in other positions sitting here, clearly meets what we have set out to do in terms of bringing residential population back into the downtown. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Ned.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. The first thing I want to say just in comments is that I don't think it's ever advisable to refer to professional attorneys and staff members as these ladies over here. I feel very strongly I need to voice that. I found it offensive, actually. However, I was swayed by the arguments as far as it goes for the appeal. I was swayed by the arguments, particularly about the cumulative impacts of CEQA. I think also the argument that the general plan called for the 63 dwelling units per acre as is supposed to be a maximum. I don't believe there's sufficient public transit to call this a transit hub. And I think at the very least there would need to be agreements that people sign that they're not going to have a vehicle. Because if you do have to park 2 blocks away, to even get a spot, then you're moving into neighborhoods where it's even harder to park. And I just think it's part of it. So it's a very close one. I do think it is within what we set out in our zoning, but I don't think that our zoning, if it results in something with this size, bulk, and scale, that it's matching what our general plan is. I am continuing to have extreme discomfort with how something can go to ABR and follow that process, and they don't have the purview, but then we don't have the purview, so then I don't even understand why we can hear an appeal if what our only purview is to say that they were within their purview or not. And I think we have a process problem. I think that that more than anything is if we're staying in our lane to just uphold whether ABR did what they were supposed to do, the answer is yes, they did what they were supposed to do. But that they continued to make comments about landscaping, about size, bulk, and scale, about neighborhood compatibility or context compatibility. And there's no, I don't know, recourse for that. And then it comes to us, and then our only question is, did they answer their question right? Is extremely frustrating, because I think we do need to address this question of cumulative effects of CEQA exemptions. One individual project, one at a time exempt, altogether not so much so. Those are my comments.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a few months back, I attended Seinfeld when he came to the Arlington. And one of the ongoing jokes he had in there is that when you're listening to somebody and you find yourself agreeing a lot of what they're saying, but you can't get yourself to get exactly where they are. And then when they're done making their points, you can't say I agree with you, so the response is you're not wrong. And so there's a whole thing in my family now that, especially my teenagers, we always say, you're not wrong, but. And Mr. Capel, I think you made a lot of things that I agree with, going back, to what Santa Barbara was and where we want it to be and where the future goes. And so a lot of those issues, I think you raised them, and they're on the community's concerns. I know this is a larger issue with what's going on in the Coomer Plaza and all that. And in the case of the upzoning in particular, where it's the 63 units per acre, that's what we had. And then the state came in over the last 5 years or so, going back 2017, 2018, and they've upzoned it with a state bonus density. And a few years back, I think it was 2018, maybe 2019, the council was looking at this, and this is about the time they started to have these upzones on top of any upzones that you did. And I remember Councilmember Sneddon and I opposed some of the upzoning that the council did at the time for this very reason, because it wasn't as prolific then in the state laws. It's only kind of clamped down even more. And my thinking at the time was, we've already upzoned to 63 units per acre, and now that 63 can become 73, 83, 93. And so we don't know where the state is going to stop in terms of what they're going to allow in terms of upgrading the density. And so for me at that time, I was like, leave the densities where they are right now, because if you upzone it even more, it's going to be greater than what it is. So at that point in particular, we've had that discussion here at council, and it has come to fruition that we upzoned and they upzoned on top of it. So I think I appreciate you raising that, because it's a very important point, and that the public needs to understand is that the density is a lot higher than we anticipated. And now, if we had even considered it, we can't even downzone it back to what it was before the high density overlay, because there's the no net loss. And so with the state right now, they are moving in a direction where they're really looking at ways to entice, force, whatever you want to use the word, encourage housing production, and limiting the tools that the city has, that cities have in counties to not approve projects. And even if we are to go down certain roads, and it gets challenged, it's tough for us to win those challenges. And so you could wind up in situations where you deny projects, but they comply with all the new state regulations. So it goes to court, and the city ends up paying a lot for those costs, and you get the project anyways. That is a very real outcome that can happen. It's happening up and down the state, or the potential to happen up and down the state. So with that, I would also say, for those interested in this very issue, Senator Scott Wiener is the architect of a lot of this, and a lot of others, but he actually did a podcast on the Ezra Klein podcast from a few days ago, and he has a lot to say about what we're talking about right now. It's about an hour and 20 minutes, but I highly encourage people to read it. But so with that, I'm where Councilmember Jordan is. I can't make the findings of public health and safety in terms of the Housing Accountability Act, and also the issue with the parking, the AB Assembly Bill 2097 within transit priority zone. That's an issue as well. My understanding is it's in a lot of places. There's others. Is that it's with any public transit, because there's other bus stops and other cases that we've heard where it's just having a bus stop by you could trigger this. So, and then I think Councilmember Jordan kind of articulated where I was at on a lot of that. So at this point, I would not be able, again, based on the Housing Accountability Act and the need for public health and safety, and I wouldn't be able to support the appeal, so I'll be voting to deny it.
Ms. Gutierrez.
I want to thank city staff. You did a really good job. Mr. Capello, you're really good. You're really good. I'm going to agree with what Mr. Friedman said about, I agreed in everything that you said. I think the previous councils, the city administration office for years, I don't think we expected the growth of Santa Barbara. And after the pandemic, we just became even more of a jewel for the United States and for people from abroad. I was born and raised here. I never thought that my district was going to become what it is today. But I think the city has certain rules, and the state also gave us some rules that we need to follow, and our hands are tied. And I think this applicant did a really good job in following those rules. But I do want to also thank public comment about the courtyards, and I think as a city, we should really go back and try to modify with some of the community's concerns, because we're only going to grow bigger. And there's obviously projects already coming our way that I never expected to see. And the city's hands are tied. I mean, I don't feel comfortable saying I'm going to uphold the appeal and getting sued by the state and, by the applicant, because literally the city is struggling with money. But Mr. Capello, you're really good, and I can see why the client hired you. I agree with a lot of things you said, so thank you.
All right, very good. Well, going back to Mr. Capello, yeah, I was around. I was getting out of college about the time you were the city attorney, and I remember down zoning. I remember also a water moratorium, and I remember the words housing crisis being used every day, because in fact there was. But here we are today, and I also agree on, parking. What the quote was up there was absolutely accurate, and I stand by those words. But I don't make the rules. I just have to enforce the rules, and I have to live by the rules. And these are the rules we have and the standards we have today. Scott Wiener, that Mr. Freeman mentioned a minute ago, is probably one of my least favorite members of the planet right now, but that's because of all these things we've had to ram them down our throats time after time. I will say this, though. Staff over here is trained and expert, and they're not to be belittled. They are the masters of the current laws, and the current laws are moving around every day. So I think it's a mistake to impugn what we thought staff produced or whatever. This is a project that is built and decided upon under our current laws, and we can wish for whatever we want to make them change, We can wish the neighborhood looked different, but the argument that the appellant's building can do that too, yeah, that's, and it's actually not even qualifying for the RPP because it's not really a residential zone, it's a commercial zone. And we're allowing, residential building that because we're trying to put residential everywhere. So I don't have to like it, and I agree with Mr. Donaldson's comment about the courtyard, but once again, this wasn't built with that set of rules. We're not going to make it up from up here. I mean, I would love to see the scale and the size of the building go down, but, once again, once it's got PDA, that's what it is. And it's below, they've made concessions to come below the height element. So, the fact that council decided, back when I was off of council, to eliminate parking in the CBD for residential is something I think is going to really bite us in the butt. But it is what it is. Those are the rules that application was made under. So I don't find any ambiguity about denying the appeal. I think it's very clear to me. The argument was made well on the other side, but I think it does fall within the purview of what we should do in terms of making the findings. And I think that staff did a good job of presenting the case as it was. So, Mr. Jordan, you have another comment? Excuse me, do you have, Mr. Jordan?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to let you know that Mr. Gutierrez has raised his hand as well.
Sorry.
Okay. I'll let Mr. Gutierrez speak before Mr. Jordan then. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I too, going off of the information that was presented to us today, don't have a cause to uphold the appeal, so I'm going to have to deny it. And I apologize to the neighboring property owner for that. Obviously, we are in a housing crisis as the chair of the ad hoc committee for our housing crisis task force. I will have to argue with some of my colleagues that there are some solutions, some things that we can implement to try to address some of these proposed projects, but that's obviously a conversation for another time. But yeah, just want to let you know how I'm going to vote on this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan.
So I'll make the motion to move to deny the appeal and uphold the Architectural Board of Review's decision granting project design approval, and have staff return with a resolution containing council's findings, incorporating both or all the Architectural Board of Review findings, the CEQA findings, and the additional talking points you made in the staff report on other ABR findings, and reflecting the outcome of the hearing.
Moved by Jordan.
Second.
Second by Alejandro Gutierrez. Very good. Everybody understand the motion? Madam Clerk.
And Councilmember Jordan, if I can have you repeat the motion I have to deny the appeal and uphold the ABR decision.
You almost
And then-
could read slide 28.
Okay.
Because I pretty much did.
Okay, very good.
Do you want me to read it again?
Sure, or what, is it essentially this slide right here?
Slide 28 with the CEQA findings on the subsequent page, and the ABR recommended findings 2 pages later on 2 pages, and direct staff to bring back a resolution reflecting the outcome.
Oh, he doesn't need to. Okay, okay. Very good, and that is a motion by Councilmember Jordan, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Alejandra Gutierrez. Let's have a vote from Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Yes to deny the appeal.
Very good, and we'll start the vote for those in chambers.
The vote is 5-1 and 1 absent. Kristen Sneddon dissenting.
Very good.
All right, very good. So the appeal is denied. Okay, we can go to council and staff communications. Any council member engagements? No council member engagements? No further public comment? Okay, so Madam Clerk, you have an item to read for closed session.
Yes, item 19, conference with city attorney, existing litigation, government code section 54956.9 D1 as described in agenda item 19.
All right, very good. We don't anticipate a report out, so we'll adjourn from closed session.